Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Pika Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Ash Had Dusk Lycanroc Pokemon. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. We were the ones who weren't afraid. We can be who we are, now we are alive. We can fight, they cannot contain us. It's who we are. We are undying. Red, who we are. 2 months after, Kalos Crisis forest somewhere between 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 and 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 City. Satoshi 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 was not someone to curse. He'd long learned that cursing especially on legendaries only got him into trouble. But he couldn't help the curse that slipped from his mouth, as another vine broke through the earth, grabbing his leg. 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 innards. If this doesn't end soon, I'll go find the idiot Team Flare in the afterlife and kill them again, he hissed through gritted teeth, kicking at the vine with little success. And Halucha, karate chop, he called frantically, as a vine snaked around Pikachu. Cha, the fighting type agreed, leaping into the air, his arm glowing with the move's energy, as he freed Pikachu. Ash growled, as the pest of a vine dragged him towards the fissure in the ground. Ninja. Greninja called from somewhere behind him and Ash watched the massive water shuriken lodge into the root, creating an explosion as a part of it got torn down, freeing Ash. The trainer tore the now lifeless plant from his leg and scrambled to his feet. Pikachu, Iron Tail, he commanded. The electric type flipped in the air, his tail glowing white as he sliced through the vines. As more broke through the earth, Ash danced back with curses, throwing another curse to the wind. Gabite, use Metal Claw. Switching between languages should have been more difficult. But it wasn't. Commanding Gabite and Pikachu in Kantonian was as easy as barking instructions to his Kalos native team in 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘. Understandably, Clement had commented on his immense skill in languages. Ash waved him off, playing his skill down as much as humanly possible. Luckily for him, the gym leader got the clue and dropped the topic. The moderate-sized dragon type roared, his arms wickedly curved claws glowing with a metallic sheen, as he danced around Ash, keeping the vines from reaching him. Ash grit his teeth, feeling helpless, as his Pokemon struggled against the remnants of the chaos left behind by Lysandra and Team Flare. Seeing the absolute chaos, he was very pleased to have asked Professor Oak to transfer his only dragon type after 𝚲𝚘𝚘 had been released, so he would be able to protect his friends and home. Hello Professor. Ash called into the videophone, as the aged man greeted back. Ash, I haven't heard from you in a while. Congratulations on being the league runner-up. Next try and you'll be the champion. Ash hummed. He wasn't sure he wanted that. His world had shifted on its axis after that absolute mess with the Jewel of Life, and he still wasn't over that one. Sure, he still wanted to grow stronger, but, suddenly all he knew, and all the priorities he ever had, seemed irrelevant. Thank you. Can I ask a favor, please? Of course, young man. What is it? I'm short a Pokemon, as I've released 𝚲𝚘𝚘, he told the man calmly. Could you please send over Gible? The man chuckled. Of course. I'll send over Gabite for you. Ash's brown eyes went wide in surprise. He hadn't expected to hear that. Are you saying he evolved? Professor Oak nodded with a big smile. He did. I was lucky enough to see it, too. He was training with Charizard of all, when it happened. He's been even more excited to see you ever since. I just didn't have the chance to call and tell you. When did it happen? The trainer asked curiously. The tiny dragon ground type had been with him since Sinnoh, and he honestly hadn't expected this. A month ago. But you were so caught up with the upcoming league and the Pokemon we now know as Zygarde, that I didn't want to distract you. I know you run into many different situations, and I didn't want you harmed by distracting you in any way. Ash rolled his eyes. I'm not looking for trouble, you know? Blame Arceus for all the shit. But, it's okay. Can you send him, then? It would be my pleasure. Just please wait a bit, my boy. Still. This chaos. He shuddered to think of what might have happened if he'd left Kalos, leaving only Greninja behind. That was the initial plan, after Zygarde had requested the ninja Pokemon's aid in restoring the Order of Kalos. But Ash wasn't one to abandon his Pokemon. He rescued too many of them, to even think about leaving his own for any PRD of time. Charizard, only a Charmander at the time. Pignite, and even kind of Chimchar, though Shinji had released the Pokemon, rather than straight down abandoned him. Pikachu, Greninja, combine moves. Ash called in annoyance. Noivern, Boomburst. All three Pokemon cried out in understanding, attacking the rapidly creeping vines. Ash felt another flare of triumph as more were destroyed, although the full-force Boomburst would definitely leave a mark. The trainer distanced himself from his Pokemon once more, giving them more room to fight, keeping his senses trailed on the area, his attention everywhere at once, keeping track of his team. He counted on them to destroy these vines, just as they counted on him to be their extra pair of eyes, when they were engrossed in their fights or helping each other. Another of Greninja's water shuriken struck, but this time a vine caught his Kalosian starter and the weapon went off course. Ash dodged too, while calling out to 𝙁𝚘𝚘 and 𝚲𝚘𝚘 to cover for each other. And that momentary lapse in attention was enough for Satoshi to find himself in a pinch. The vines closed around him, and even his Pokémon. His eyes caught the massive water shuriken still stuck in the thickest thing, that might as well have been a tree's bark and not a random, newly emerged vine. Could this, he mused. His heart was in his throat, his fingers tingling with aura. The vines tightened and pain shot through his body. Pikachu zapping him, held affection and annoyance, sometimes. Never the intent to harm. Charizard's flamethrower was also pure affection. These vines weren't sentient. Whatever pinch of sentience these had, was focused on destruction. He reached towards the water shuriken, his fingers slipped through the water projectile, the icy liquid just like water from a creek coming from the mountains. The vines tightened. His team struggled, hurrying as much as they could, to save him. Come on. As much as he loathed it, he focused on his aura. And on the feeling that flooded his senses whenever the bond phenomenon kicked in. He pulled back and tried to grab the shuriken again. Please. His fingers wrapped around the sharp water weapon. He pulled, and it got free. His team froze at the sight. Satoshi yanked at the weapon and as it finally slipped from the vine, he slammed it against the vine holding him, slicing through it. As surreal as it was, he was holding one of Greninja's water shuriken, as if it was a normal, man-made weapon. Don't stop, he barked at his team, as he whacked at the parasitic plant with the water shuriken, borrowed from Greninja. Were they not preoccupied with getting rid of these pests, he would have laughed at the utterly flabbergasted look on the ninja Pokémon's usually stoic visage. Sweet ho-oh, best sight ever. Ash felt completely drained, as they looked around the sizable patch of the forest their struggle ruined. But at least the vines were completely gone. Can you sense any other Greninja? He asked wearily. Ninja, the water dark type, shook his head. Greninja. Ash groaned, rubbing his face. Goo, he trailed off, glancing at his hands. His fingers were still a little damp from using the water shuriken, which had dissolved a bit after he freed himself. Pikapi? Pikachu called, nudging him, now that he was sitting on his shoulder again. I'm fine, Pikachu, he assured his friend and then looked at the one who might have answers to the questions whirling in his head. Greninja, did you notice? Ninja? Ash frowned. Your water shuriken. One didn't explode upon contact. I used it. I could touch it. The Kalosian starter nodded slowly. Greninja ninja? Ash huffed, rolling his eyes. No, I've no clue how, he frowned, trailing off again. Ja? The ninja Pokémon asked, putting a webbed foot on Ash's shoulder. The trainer grimaced. It might have been my aura. Or, our bond? Or both. I honestly don't know how or why, he groaned in frustration, cutting off his rant. 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 called, walking closer, nudging Ash gently with his snout. Bite, 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 agreed readily, his eyes darting around the eerily quiet patch of forest. You're right guys, Ash hummed. Let's go. We need to find a safe place. Ash held up the Pokeballs and recalled his team, leaving only 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 and 𝚲𝚘𝚘 free. Could you two scout the area for a safe place to spend the night, please? I'll wait here till you return, but then we'll have to move. Both gave growls of agreement and launched into the air. After a good 10 minutes of waiting or maybe 15? Ash was too drained to properly keep track of time. Both returned, 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 happily reporting he found a safe place to camp out for the night. Ash recalled 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 and rubbed the dragon type. Thanks, can you lead us there? The blue creature agreed, launching into the air again, this time his trainer right on his heels. After a light 10-minute jog, they made it and Ash smiled as 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 landed. You outdid yourself, my friend. Nice and protected and, is that a pond over there? 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 agreed with a nod, happily rubbing to his trainer's side. Ash laughed, running his fingers across 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘's rough scales. Since he'd grown, the dragon type settled for rubbing himself all over Ash. It was a rough thing, because despite how streamlined 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 and Garchomp were, their scales were rough and sharp, so the dark blue dragon usually left little scratches all over his uncovered skin. But this was still an improvement from being bitten. Mostly because 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 was much heavier than before evolution. Ash looked at Pikachu, who jumped from his shoulder. The trainer let the rest of his team out, looking at 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. Could you two bring some firewood, please? 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘, the fighting type agreed. Ash quickly set up camp and then looked at 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 and 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘. Please stay and watch the place, while I'll go get us some food. Ninja, 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 volunteered, stepping next to Ash. The human nodded, appreciating the company, and slipped off into the forest to gather berries and seasonings for dinner. He wasn't as much of a good cook as 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 or 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘, but the first few years on the road, he'd picked up enough from Takashi that he wouldn't starve even if it was just him and his Pokemon. He wasn't a Pokemon breeder either, or one to cook 5-star Pokepuffs, like Serena. But he knew what his Pokemon liked to eat and what they needed to have a healthy and rounded diet. They'll be just fine. His mother will never have to know he'd spent the last legs of his Kalos day alone, with only his team for company. She'd worry herself sick over nothing. He could take care of himself and his team, thank you. And while he liked having friends travel with him, he wouldn't die out in the wild alone for a few weeks. Once he deemed the berries and species enough, he was ready to turn back, until he heard rustling in the bushes. Trainer and Pokemon froze at once and Ash made a gesture towards the sound. 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 nodded in understanding and disappeared soundlessly in a burst of speed, befitting of one who was called the ninja Pokemon. What's it? Ash asked, closing his eyes in concentration to let the mental connection click into place. While he could use this any way he liked, he usually didn't. He could understand his Pokemon just fine. It's a 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘, 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 answered. Ash hummed. Can you get it? 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 shifted in his spot, stealing a glance at him. Ash rolled his eyes, not moving, careful not to make a sound. I like to eat meat. ♀ and Garchomp also occasionally prefer meat over berries. It's more substantial. Can you catch it or should I? No, it's all right. You just momentarily startled me, the water type admitted. Of course I can catch it. After 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘's successful hunt, his Pokemon was swift and precise. The blue amphibian returned bringing the fruit of his hunt. Ash was sure the 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 barely felt the flick of night slash. He had Pikachu start a fire with a few sparks of electricity and dinner was soon cooking over the fire. As they sat or lay curled around the fire, Ash couldn't help but think about what had transpired hours earlier. He looked down at his hands, looking for signs of anything out of the ordinary, but there was nothing. Right now, even his previously raging aura was buried, slumbering deep inside him. Nin, 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘? Ash's eyes snapped up at the call and then he shook his head. It was almost weird how silent the campsite was now. Usually someone was always around to chatter. But he was the only human tonight, and the day-long struggle against the remains of Zygarde's parasitic vines had drained him as much as it had drained his team. No, nothing's wrong, he dismissed the other's concern quickly. Pikachu, however, noticed and gave him a sharp look, ears flattened against his small body. 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘, he drawled, entirely unimpressed. Ash huffed in annoyance, gaining the other's attention too. The trainer rolled his eyes. It's just weird I've managed to touch the water shuriken. That never happened before. 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 agreed with a small nod, his pink eyes trailed on his human partner. Nin, 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘, ninja? Ash rolled his eyes. You seriously have to ask that? Of course I've no clue how it happened. 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 raised his arms placatingly. Nin, ninja? Ninja, 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘. Ash sighed heavily, rubbing his face. Yeah. Might have been the aura. I usually hate using it, so I suppress, he groaned. Can we try tomorrow? I want to see if it was just some fluke or if I can do it again. 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 nodded in silent consent, and Ash smiled. The next morning, after a healthy breakfast, trainer and Pokemon stood next to each other. 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘, the water dark type explained patiently, offering 2 normal-sized water shuriken. Ash eyed the weapons with a slight grimace. Up till now, he'd tried to ignore all that. You can't run forever. Obviously, the universe had enough about you running, he thought. Ash closed his eyes and focused on his aura. The energy roared to life, like a river breaking through a dam, and Ash couldn't help his breath shuddering. As he opened his eyes, he noticed the brief blue tint the world gained before it was gone. But still, he could tell his sight was sharper than before. Good, 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 called telepathically. That was another side effect of the bond, although that may just have been aura. No matter how much he tried to suppress it, the ancient power always found ways to peek through the constraints, almost like it was taunting him. It's free now. Try? Ash reached out for the shuriken, but his hand slipped through. As he pulled back, a few droplets fell from his fingers. What now? He asked, annoyed. Just the idea of using aura unnerved him, even though long before, at Snowbell, he'd made a promise to 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 of all. Calm down, the ninja Pokemon coaxed. Don't fight the power that's in you. We know you can do it. Saw it yesterday. But it won't ever work if you keep saying the opposite, Satoshi, 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 insisted, his pink eyes deadpan and unimpressed beneath the ever-present calmness. Ash closed his eyes. His words at the Snowbell Forest ringing clearly in his mind. I've run from this ability, and what it means ever since, well, practically ever since I knew about it. But now I know it won't solve anything. So, could we be a team again, please? Would you lend me your strength? The water type looked at him for a long moment and then nodded, offering a foreleg, curled like a fist. Greninja. He opened his eyes again, and they glowed with the faint blue of his aura. He could feel it syncing with his Pokémon again, just much more calm now. Calmer. Firmer. More permanent. I won't do it again. I won't run from what and who I am. You taught me not to run from my past. Sorry, Ash muttered. Let's try this again. Greninja nodded, waiting for his trainer to gather himself. Ash coaxed his aura up again and reached for the water shuriken. This time, the water-made weapon was solid under his touch. Cool and firm, one that he could take from the Pokémon. Good. Now comes the part where you learn to use it. Ash rolled his eyes. Very funny. I don't know how to use these. Or even. No fight hand-to-hand. He grimaced at that. Maybe I should learn with all the shit that's been happening since I'd set off from Pallet at 10. I'm here to help. And 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚗 a part-fighting type. He can teach you some of the move sequences as well. Ash sighed and then nodded. Yeah. Maybe, we really should do it. But first, I want to learn how to handle your weapons, if you don't mind. Greninja nodded and threw the shuriken in his grip at the nearest tree. Now, you try. Ash made a face and threw it, and it went horribly off course. You're too stiff. Loosen your wrist, and maybe try focusing on the aura we share. Mirror my moves, like when we share the bond. Ash nodded solemnly, as Greninja created another pair of water shuriken, offering one. Ash closed his eyes, trying to grasp the aura that slipped from his grip so far. The one that he let slip, because he hadn't even wanted to acknowledge its existence. Did it do him any good? The sheet in his life started with 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚗 and Lugia's prophecy. Ever since, it only kept piling up. Perhaps, the aura had been some sort of warning not to ignore? Yet, he still had. He ignored everything, pretending to be normal. Clearly. Greninja was another reminder, after many years of almost suspicious silence. You're not normal. It's you, the universe at large seemed to scream. Blue ripples in the pitch-black water. Blue hugging him, like a blanket during a snowy night. Greninja right next to him, a mix of blue and red? Ash opened his eyes and threw the shuriken. This time, it stuck below Greninja's previous one. Much better, Greninja praised with a nod. You'll need lots of practice, so you won't always have to reach for our bond to get this result. If you practice, all you'll need the aura for is to grasp the weapon that I made and not to get it on mark. Ash looked at the tree and then heaved a sigh. That's going to be a long stay in Kalos. I don't want to go home a freak mother out by practicing hand-to-hand with you or 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚗. Greninja hummed in agreement. Then we stay. Or go somewhere you deem the right place. I'm sure the others won't mind. Ash smiled faintly. Right. Now, let's get moving. Look around if there are any more vines. If not, we can just camp out and train and enjoy the peace. Almost 3 weeks out in the wilderness of Mountain Kalos and 2 weeks into training in all sorts of things with his Pokémon, and Ash could honestly say he was starting to get the hang of it. 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚗 and Greninja both agreed that he was a quick study, startlingly so, for a human. Pikachu had first freaked out at the idea of this more physical sort of training, but he knew better than anyone the number of impossible and deadly times they'd been through. So, after a brief, initial freakout, he actually thanked the two for teaching their trainer, but not before threatening to thunderbolt them if they went overboard. So after 3 weeks it was an almost content routine. They'd eat breakfast, enjoy the peace, and explore the surroundings of their camp more thoroughly. Then lunch, training with Greninja and 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚗. Then sparring training for the others, so they'd stay in shape too. Dinner, maybe some stories shared from times past, and then bed. A simple routine the group happily adapted to. As much fun as gym battles and tournaments were, it was nice to be away from civilization for a change. And today was no different. An hour after breakfast, Ash darted farther from his lazing Pokémon, to join Greninja on the other side of the clearing. The ninja Pokémon created a blade of dark energy with Night Slash and offered it to his trainer. Ash took a moment to grasp his aura and make sure it was under control, before he reached out. His fingers wrapped around the dark blade and he stepped back. Greninja created the exact same blade for himself and they both took a basic offensive stance, eyes trailed on each other. Greninja didn't give him a verbal warning, like he did during the first few days, after Ash had first asked the Pokémon to teach him. But the slight shift in aura helped and Ash could react in time, shifting his feet on the grass and raising his blade to meet the Greninja's. It hissed a little under the pressure and Ash took a breath, gathering some aura around it for reinforcement. Training like this helped him wind down, keep his instincts sharp and maintain a finer control of his aura, which would have been hard otherwise. Greninja had some unusual ways of teaching, but Ash wasn't going to complain. Obviously, it was effective. He pushed back with his full strength and Greninja was forced to release their locked weapons and he shifted his grip to jab him with the sharp end, but Ash dodged and instead went for the Pokémon side. Greninja caught the move and stopped him, shifting to face him fully again. Good. Use any openings you can find. Also, using Aura gives you the upper hand in strength and speed, even if the one you face is older or stronger than you. Or bigger. Ash hummed, whirling on his heels, his brown gaze focused. He kept losing the spars, not a surprise, but he wouldn't give up. One of these days, he was going to surprise Greninja. They kept trading blows rapidly, dancing around the clearing as from time to time, either one or the other, was forced to back away, to gain space and momentum again. Ash wasn't sure how long they'd been at the fighting, but Greninja had considerable stamina, when he didn't have to survive heavily damaging moves or extend his powers for defensive moves. And, from all the running and traveling, Ash had some stamina, too. Definitely more stamina than Clément. Clément sneezed, as he was cleaning up the battlefield after another gym battle. His father and Bonnie looked at him inquiringly. Are you okay, Clément? The inventor smiled sheepishly. Yeah, Bonnie. I just have a feeling someone's talking, or thinking about me. He'd never be able to outdo a Pokémon on that, but that wasn't the goal of these sessions. Greninja stuck again and Ash's aura sense tingled as the blade neared him. He leaned back to avoid damage, while raising his left hand to try deflecting the other, helping to maintain his balance. Until he heard that voice? Lycanroc. Use Stone Edge, someone called. He couldn't place the language, but he still understood it. There was the distinct sound of a Pokémon emerging from a Pokeball and then an almost blood-curdling howl. Ash and Greninja rounded on the voice at once. It was a shaggy, red-furred Pokémon. Bipedal and distinctly wolf-like, with glowing crimson eyes. The Pokémon punched the ground and massive stone spikes that glowed blue appeared from the ground, heading right for Greninja. One drop in the water. Let's go. Greninja, Ash called, his muscles already coiled for action. Another drop and ripples. Greninja's form changed that moment and like mirror images of one another, trainer and Pokémon leapt to the side, their blades brandished at the approaching attack. The double knight slash cut right through the stone edge, surprising the opposing side. Ash and Greninja landed just out of reach of the red canine, both their blades still brandished for self-defense. What the hell in the distortion world? Ash roared in Unovian, making a wild guess, eyes narrowing on the blonde, standing behind the unknown Pokémon. If this was not a Kalos native and sure as hell he wasn't, then Unovian was his best bet. Everyone spoke that. Think, he heard the Pokémon being called Lycanroc. Do you just go and attack strangers out of the blue, without warning or a proper battle challenge? We were training. The blonde male and he had quite startling green eyes, Ash had to admit, stared at him in speechless surprise as if he was the one who ordered that stone edge. Well? Ash asked, rather annoyed, as he flicked his hand, letting his knight slash fade. Greninja kept his active and eyed the duo suspiciously. The blonde's eyes bulged out before he huffed, taking a moment to visibly compose himself as he crossed his arms. Annoyance lined his features, but Ash could see the disbelief in his eyes. Well, excuse you, the blonde grouched in irritation, his Unovian smooth, but still somehow peppered with an accent Ash couldn't place. It very much looked like you were being attacked. I was trying to help. Ash glared. We were training. Who the hell trains with their Pokémon like that? The blonde demanded, annoyed and disbelieving. I do, Ash growled, crossing his arms as he glared at the stranger. The stranger glared back. Greninja and the other's Pokémon kept sizing each other up, trying to decide the other's threat level. You're insane. Ash bristled. Excuse me, Blondie? I said, you're insane, the other spelled out with a glare. Normal people don't train like that. Ash rolled his eyes. Well, news for you. I'm not normal. Who in Oho's feathers are you, anyway? And what are you doing here? The blonde gave him a contemplating side-eye. Gladion ether. You. Ash contemplated for a moment. Satoshi Ketchum, but you can call me Ash. A pause. You're not from Kalos. The blonde shook his head. I come from Melee, Alola. This is my partner, Lycanroc. Ash nodded, gesturing at his own Pokémon. Greninja. Are you from somewhere around here? The blonde asked, eyeing him oddly. He shook his head. I come from Pallet Town, Kanto. What are you doing here, though? Sure. Alola isn't far away, but still an ocean. Gladion huffed. My mother and sister dragged me here. They wanted some bonding time after mother was done with her business, but, he shivered, I escaped. Ash snorted. I can relate to that. I'd rather not think of some of my fashion-focused friends when they're on a shopping spree. Gladion hummed, glancing at Greninja. Take, you hadn't seen one before, Ash said. The blonde shook his head negatively. No. Ash nodded in the direction of his camp. Maybe we could sit down. Warning. You try something nasty and sooner than you can say, Arceus save me, my Pikachu's going to blast you to coastal Kalos. Got it. Crystal clear, Gladion agreed warily, keeping an eye on the Greninja from the corner of his eye. Again, who trained like that with their Pokemon? Was the guy nuts? They reached the main campsite only 3 minutes of walking, and Gladion froze in the spot when he noticed the many Pokemon all turning to them. He noticed a small, yellow Pokemon, a Pikachu, take the lead, the other Pokemon soon following suit. Although, other than the Pikachu, the 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 and a 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘, Gladion didn't recognize the other two species. Pika, the Pikachu growled, cheek pouches sparkling as the 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 darted closer too, growling. Gladion faltered as Lycanroc growled too, though he held up a hand to his partner. He did a quick count 6, with the Greninja. So a whole team. Clearly, the Pokemon were trying to protect their trainer from a stranger. Pikachu, be nice, Ash scolded, in what Gladion recognized as 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘, although he couldn't clearly understand. He's staying for a bit, he told his other Pokemon. No need to be hostile. And Pikachu, could you start a fire? Pika, the mouse nodded. Do you always talk to your Pokemon in different languages? Ash shrugged, switching back to Enovian. I mostly use the language of the region they're from. Sinnoh, Kanto and Johto have the same with some variation, anyway. It's only Alolan and Galarian I've little clue about. Never been there before. I see, Gladion nodded. You'd like to stay till the food gets ready? Ash offered. Doesn't take too long, and we could have a battle, maybe? A proper one this time? Gladion had the decency to blush and look away. I'm sorry? I shouldn't have assumed things. Ash rolled his eyes with an easy grin. Sometimes assumptions are all we have. No harm done. Besides, I know, I have some unusual habits. Trust me, my friends keep nagging me about those. Gladion hummed as Ash nodded to his Pokemon. You can let yours out, if you like. There's enough food for them too. And now that they know you're friendly, no one will attack. All right, he said, though his eyes trailed on the 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. You've a fine 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. Thanks. He's been with me since he was an egg, so I raised him. Slightly smaller than the ride 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 I have at home, but still well within the species parameters, I'd say. Ash peeled up at the words, as he grabbed the pot he'd use. What, do you mean, ride 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘? Gladion hummed as he walked closer to the fire. Alola has a tradition of ride Pokemon. We live in harmony with them, so much we use them for transport. Some are taught to handle special ride gear for safe transport. 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. Charizard or, he looked at 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 with interest, Garchomp are one of the few Pokemon that, if trained, could be considered for air ride Pokemon. Ash listened to him, head tilted to the side in interest. Oh, wow. You learn something new every day. Are there others too? Gladion nodded as his Umbreon settled next to him. Tauros or Stoutland are the most common land ride Pokemon, while we use Lapras or Wailmer as water ride Pokemon. Neat. Why, are you here? You said you ditched your mother and sister to avoid the shopping spree, so? Gladion frowned. I had an argument with my mother and, he frowned. Ash watched the other's face. May I ask what about? I find mothers can be overbearing sometimes, he said, recalling how his own mother acted sometimes. Gladion scoffed. Mine's just childish and unreasonable. A colleague of hers was mistreating a Pokemon. I took said Pokemon and he accused me. Of course, I denied having taken the Pokemon and, there you have the argument. Ash listened, his frown deepening more and more, as he heard a Pokemon being mistreated. Why didn't you tell her the truth? Gladion scoffed with an eye roll. Faba's got a silver tongue and Tapu's know why, she trusts him. I tried telling her once or twice, but she wouldn't listen. So I took Rockruff. Rockruff? Ash asked in confusion. Gladion nodded and took out a Pokeball. Out came a small, brown puppy-like Pokemon with startlingly blue eyes. Rockruff, a rock-type native to Alola. It evolves either into midnight form Lycanroc, he nodded towards his own partner, which is a rock-dark type, or into a midday form Lycanroc, which is rock-normal. Wow. Branched evolution's always cool, Ash said with a light grin as he crouched down to look at the pup, slowly reaching out. Careful. They bite, and this one even more. Probably because it was wild and Faba had not been kind to it. Ash hummed, crouching before the puppy, slowly extending a hand. The pup flashed his small claws and Ash heard the soft warning growl. Hey, we're not going to hurt you. Gladion just wanted to help, he said soothingly, grimacing when he realized he was still talking in 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘. But it wasn't like he knew 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘. "We're friends," he murmured, sending tiny waves of aura towards the small Pokemon. Rockruff sniffed at his hand tentatively, slowly relaxing as the aura was doing its work. The pup rubbed his nose against Ash's hand, but before the trainer could even think of returning the tentative, friendly gesture, the small rock type turned around and hurried to stay by Gladion's Lycanroc. Gladion stared. And stared. "What in the name of 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 Fini's fins?" the blonde croaked out in disbelief. "That's a wild Rockruff and their bite can easily break a bone." Ash chuckled with a shrug. "Pokemon just like me. Food's ready, you want some?" Gladion sniffed the air. Doesn't smell too bad." Ash dug out 2 plates from his supplies and dished out the stew, offering one to Gladion. The blonde took it with a nod. Ash placed his own down and turned to his Pokemon, taking out their dishes to give them food. He poured extra, keeping in mind that Umbreon, Lycanroc and Rockruff were also around. "Do you guys mind sharing with our guests?" His Pokemon growled and took a step back, invitingly looking at the Alolan trainer's partners. Lycanroc and Umbreon approached carefully, but Ash noticed that Rockruff had stayed away from everyone. He looked at Pikachu. "You mind sharing a bowl with the others?" "Rockruff doesn't seem to want company." "Chew," the electric type said. Ash smiled, rubbing his partner's ears and then letting Pikachu join the others. He took the small bowl, poured some food and pushed it towards Rockruff. "Ruff, ruff," the Pokemon barked, growling. Ash rolled his eyes, letting another tiny wave of aura seep out. "I don't want to hurt you. Told you already. Please eat." He pushed the bowl closer. When the small wolf sniffed at the food, Ash's lips curled up in triumph. Not wanting to ruin the moment, he backed away and then picked up his food, joining Gladion. "You're good with Pokemon," the blonde observed. "I have several at home, whom I've taken in after abusive trainers threw them out or just abandoned them," he shrugged. "All different species, but they're fundamentally the same. Distrustful, with possibly low self-esteem or bad habits. All stemming from the way they've been treated. That Rockruff is just confused. Distrustful and wary of what might come." He sat opposite Gladion. As they took their first bites of the food, Ash stole glances at his guest, curious what he'd think. Gladion took a tentative bite of the food. It wasn't the kind of picture-perfect look the dishes looked that made it to the Ether family's dinner table. But the smell was tantalizing anyway. And then he took a bite, and his eyes widened. Succulent, slightly spicy and a sea of flavors he had never tasted before. Alola's cuisine was mostly sweet or salty. Toro's meat and seafood and sweet tapu lele. "I've never tasted anything this good. Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked. Ash stared at him with scrunched eyebrows, confusion glimmering in his deep brown eyes, and Gladion went red in the face when he realized he'd spoken Alolan. Ash didn't speak his mother tongue. He cleared his throat and made sure to switch back into Enovian, so the Kanto native would understand him. "My apologies. I didn't mean to." Ash waved him off. "No big deal. I sometimes switch too, which is funny, because neither my Enovian, nor my Honese nor the 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 friends I made during my travel speak any Cantonian. So, how do you like it?" Gladion was sure his eyes were glimmering like a fangirl drooling over a champion, but he didn't care. "This is heavenly. Where did you learn to cook like this?" "Several of my friends are excellent cooks. I'm nowhere near as good as them, but I like to think I've picked up some tricks and recipes over my years on the road. This one's a traditional Cantonese dish. It's my favorite, so whenever I come across ingredients for it, I make it. Though it's nowhere near as good as Takashi's, or my mother's," he muttered, so quiet by the time he reached the name that Gladion barely caught it. "Well, I'd like to disagree. This is delicious," he said, and just to emphasize his words, he took another bite of the stew. The Cantonian hummed. "I'm glad you think so. But say, are you still up for a fight after dinner?" Gladion's eyes glimmered with steel. "If I can repay the fine food with a battle, then yes." Ash grinned. "It's settled then." They were looking forward to an action-packed afternoon. 5 days after meeting Pallet Town, Kanto. Another year, and several months, crossing border after border to Kalos and unearthing all its secrets. He was back in Pallet Town after more than a year. Home, sweet home. Or not. He never quite felt like he belonged, even after all that had happened. The professor and Shigeru were here, and that was nice. And his mother lived here, too, but Ash frowned. Even after all the time, the thought of his mother brought a raging vortex of emotions. He loved her, but there were also questionable things, and no, he didn't mean her letting him set out on a Pokemon journey at 10. That was entirely Kanto tradition and law. His mother had nothing to do with that. "Pikapi?" Pikachu called, nudging him worriedly with a paw. The trainer chuckled at the soft touch, Pikachu's tiny claws always tickled him when the mouse did this, and scratched his friend's cheek in return. "I'm fine, buddy. Just a bit lost in thought." The narrow road leading into the town was well-worn and familiar. The scent of grass and flowers, even dare he say it? Even the aura was different from Kalos. His lips curled into the faintest of smiles at the sight of the small, white house at the edge of town. Even if he didn't have the best of relationships with his mother, he still loved her, and the house was a comforting sight. Even if it felt small and constricting even on the best of days. He never felt like he belonged here. On the road while still in Kanto, the feeling had subsided, but he never quite found the place of comfort he was subconsciously looking for. He took a turn and crossed into 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘. Few more steps, he told himself. His feet were almost heavy on the little cobblestone path leading to the door. But he opened it anyway and stepped into the house. "𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘," he called. It was almost weird speaking Cantonese again, after having spent most of the time speaking Anovian with Clement and then learning 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 from the blonde gym leader. Just because he understood 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 quickly, didn't mean learning was like a snap of fingers. Clement still had to teach him. Granted, the inventor had been flabbergasted by the speed at which he learned 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. Even Professor Sycamore had been surprised that after their second meeting he already greeted the man in his mother tongue. His mother peeked out of the kitchen. "Okaranashi," she returned, but there was no smile on her face. Instead, her caramel eyes were slightly narrowed as she crossed her arms. Ash grimaced internally, suddenly feeling 10 times more drained than before. Aged 19 soon 20, and his mother still treated him like a toddler. When she could be bothered to do so, that is. "You're late. I thought you'd head home right after the league. I had something to take care of. I was planning on getting on the earliest plane after the mess had been cleared and the airport was open again. But then I remembered something right before I had to cross the checkpoint to buy my ticket. So I turned around and stayed longer." "I can see that," his mother huffed in annoyance. "At least call if your stay is extended." "Yeah. Sorry. Should have called," he said, too tired to get into a pointless argument again. She always nagged him, ever since he had first set out on the road, after receiving Pikachu. "So you're staying home for now?" "No," he wanted to say. Whenever he stayed too long, he grew restless. Like an Arcanine forced behind bars. Or when Pikachu was forced into his Pokeball. "For a little rest," he said instead. Not giving a definite time of how long he will stay was the best way out, if he ever felt too trapped again. His mother smiled, something glimmering in her eyes. Ash swallowed hard. "Good. Now, come on and eat. I cooked your favorite." Since the smell was so tantalizing and since he hadn't had anything since an early breakfast, he didn't protest. Oh, sweet oh-ho, he'll have to get used to the time differences again. Just thinking about his messed up sleep schedule again made his head hurt. Visiting home to see his Pokemon was nice. It was always nice to see the affectionate horde, and it was always entertaining to have the newcomers, in this case, most of the Kalos team, introduced to those at home. Charizard's reaction to 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 having evolved was the best. And whenever he was at home, Ash would drop by at the professor's lab and help him out with whatever needed to be done. Mostly help out with taking care of the massive amount of Pokemon, seeing as they were his to begin with. But he also helped out with some data sorting, and he gladly shared Sycamore's findings about Mega Evolution. After all, the professor would eventually hear or read about that, anyway. Best source is the first-hand account though, right? So, Mega Evolution without the stone, a proof of your strong bond with Greninja, the professor mused. Ash leaned back in the swivel chair he was borrowing from the professor, sipping a large mug of coffee. If there was one thing he truly missed in Kalos, that was coffee. He tried not to drink too much of the stuff with Bonnie around. Sometimes, the little girl was too curious for her own good, and caffeine wasn't for kids. She was energetic enough even without getting extra help. "You can phrase it that way," Ash said, taking another sip. Oak raised an eyebrow at him. "What do you mean?" Ash shrugged. "I mean nothing. It's just, Sycamore didn't know about my aptitude for aura or how strong mine is. Greninja are a species sensitive to it, like Lucario. Clearly, Greninja's unique genetic makeup has as much to do with this as much as my aura." "I see," the professor nodded, visibly taking a mental note of the information. If Ash was truly grateful about something, it was Oak's open-mindedness. He told a lot of things to the man and even helped his research in various ways. In ways others could not do so. In exchange, Oak kept his secrets and took care of his Pokemon. And corralled his mother whenever it became inevitably necessary. A real grandfather figure in his life. And Shigeru, like a brother. Sometimes an annoying one, but still a brother. "Do you plan to do something about it?" the professor asked. Ash scrunched his brows in confusion. "Whatever do you mean?" Like, I didn't tell 𝚲𝚘𝚗, but I stayed behind to train a bit more with Greninja. But, the professor hummed, his eyes aimlessly trailing his lab in thought. You said, you gained the same injuries as Greninja? Ash shook his head. More like, I feel his pain. So as long as he's injured, I feel it. Getting to Nurse Joy quickly usually helps, but a Pokemon Center isn't around every corner, especially when you're on the road between two cities. Oak nodded in understanding. Exactly, Ash murmured, taking another huge gulp of caffeine. How had he survived Kalos without it? Have you ever thought about using special Pokeballs? Ash's eyes snapped up. Pikachu had a Cherish Ball, but it was never used, so it was just symbolic. And Ash being a little paranoid after all the shit in his life. A heal ball for Greninja might be beneficial, especially if you want to keep him around, like you do with Pikachu. And maybe just as beneficial for you. Ash hummed thoughtfully. He usually went to new regions with only Pikachu, but, well, he got the signal when it was shoved in his face, and Arceus certainly shoved it right into his face. And as annoying as the whole chosen one to save the world thing was, the bond he had with Greninja was just as special as the one with Pikachu. Even if, that manifested differently. I'm not one to use special Pokeballs, he shrugged. Maybe it would be time to do so, my boy, the professor said, scratching an address to a piece of paper. You can find specific Pokeballs in this store. Ash took the paper and nodded. I'll think about it. Thanks, Professor. Ash was in his room, his mind a bit all over the place, as he went through the list of supplies he might need. Yesterday, Professor Oak had asked him to run a quick errand for him to Alola. Namely, delivering Pokemon eggs to the professor's cousin. Rough. The champion, yeah, Orange League. How had the world forgotten he was in the Orange Hall of Fame? Not that it mattered. Turned his gaze on the pup. While technically he was just looking after Rockruff for Gladion, the little rascal was growing on him more and more. But maybe the puppy Pokemon had a human he cared about, a trainer? I'm fine, Rockruff, Ash reassured him, rubbing the pup behind the ear. Doesn't seem like it, Rockruff returned. Smart as he was, he realized that whenever Ash touched him, he was understood word for word. Well, this was good and bad. Ash only understood his Pokemon this clearly. It was a sign of strong bonds. But Rockruff wasn't, technically his. Just a bit distracted. I gotta pack before we go to Alola. I'll take you home. The pup blinked at him with those huge, cute blue eyes. Home? Back, to the island and the nice human. Ash perked up. Yeah. Back to the island. Do you have a trainer? Rockruff shook his head. Not really. He never kept me in that weird sphere. And I often hunted for myself. I just visited him sometimes, because he was so nice. Or spent a few days in his den. But then that mean human took me. And the one with Lycanroc saved me. Ash chuckled, understanding dawning on him. A wild Pokemon who grew close to a nice human. That warmed his heart. That's all right. I'll take you back home and you can visit that nice human, if you like. Ash turned away from the pup to grab a change of clothes, folding them neatly into his backpack just as the door opened. Ash looked up and gave a small smile. Even if his mother was difficult sometimes, he cared for her. 𝚲𝚗? Hanako's deep brown eyes jumped to his backpack and to the set of clothes he was holding. She tilted her head to the side in curiosity. What are you up to, Satoshi? Ash hummed. Just packing for the journey. Journey, she echoed almost disbelievingly. You just made it home from Kalos, Satoshi. Surely, you cannot be thinking about going again. I do. Professor asked for a bit of help and I said yes, he said simply, not seeing anything wrong. Still, there was a shadow in his mother's eyes. Her frown was prominent too. And you didn't think to ask if I was ready for you to go? Ash furrowed his brows, genuinely confused. Whatever do you mean? I'm off and out there. Been like this since I was 10. Exactly, she insisted, raising her voice slightly. That happened one too many times, if something worldwide just went down, for Ash to be too upset about it. And you just got home. Don't you want to spend some time with your mother while resting? You must be tired by now, Satoshi. He huffed. Rested on the way home. And, well, staying idle was never my thing. And I'm still home, 𝚲𝚗. I'm not going off tomorrow at sunrise. I'm just preparing to go. But you're still going to leave. Then I'll be left here waiting. All alone. Can't you just say no and stay home this once? I know you're not exactly fond of staying in one place, but what about your Pokemon? I'm sure they could use a small break, especially sweet little Pikachu. Maybe even visit and spend a little time with the others? They haven't seen you in so long. That was a low blow. The moment those words registered in his brain, Ash's whole body was tense with barely suppressed nerves and aura that churned under his skin like boiling magma. He could feel Greninja reaching out with his own, trying to soothe him, but this was just too low a blow. Ash took a deep breath, trying to rein in the raging storm inside. Trying to remember Greninja's lessons about self-control and stillness. That was the hardest part about his aura handling lessons with his Pokémon. But, well, there was no running from aura now, so they'd taken it full throttle. He never did anything halfway, anyway. And Greninja had learned that. Pikachu can share his own thoughts. If he'd like a longer break, he can say so himself. And I've been around the ranch since coming home and played and trained with the others. In fact, 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 and 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 would like to stay, he said stiffly. And quite literally, Pikachu could share his thoughts. Not that his mother knew that. His mother rolled her eyes with an annoyed huff, as if he were a 5-year-old who didn't understand the concept the adult was trying to explain. That's very well, dear, and I'm glad they're staying, but what about you? My child? It's like you're purposely avoiding being home. Why don't you want to stay for a while? Would it really hurt to spend time with me? Is it really that terrible being here in Pallet Town? Ash winced inwardly at that. How could he explain this to her, without upsetting her even more? She was content here, with Mimi. For him, Pallet Town was too small and quiet. Like a gilded cage. I know. I love you. You know that. But I can't. Stay. Not for long. His mother sighed heavily, throwing her hands in the air, annoyance still present on her pretty features. The brown eyes he inherited from her, alas, his shone with the shade of whiskey, or dirty gold, in the sun, filled with anger and disbelief. You know what? Fine, I give. Do what you want. Go on your journey while I stay here, sick with worry. You're just like your father, though I guess I'm lucky that I at least get calls from you. Or will you eventually stop those too? Another low blow. His aura was positively boiling now. Rockruff whined on the bed, showing he was feeling the effects of his raging emotions, but Ash was too focused on his mother and on his anger, to try retracting the power and calming the pup. Sick with worry, he echoed disbelievingly. I can take care of myself. I've been on the road for years now. I'm a league champion, several other leagues finalist, and I've saved the world a couple of times too. And it's not like you get to compare me to a man you never even want to talk about. I think I know well enough by now that you can take care of yourself, Satoshi, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. Knowing that you choose being in danger, over peace and quiet with me. Both of you. But I wanted you to be happy, so I stayed here and I stayed quiet. You were just so excited to follow in his footsteps. I thought I would never see you again, but then you came back and you had been hurt. And it kept happening, and I thought it was enough that at least you came back, but could one of you at least choose me for once? Why must you be so selfish? Now, the anger was like that blast burn from Alan's Charizard, and not even Greninja's silent presence, curled in the Pokeball, was enough to calm him. Pikachu was perched on the windowsill, above Rockruff, and was as taken aback as the Alola rock type. At least, his friend was smart enough not to get involved, because that would only be oil to the already raging fire. I am the selfish one? Look in the mirror then. You're asking me to stay when you know I could be doing good out in the world. I helped at 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 Island, barely on the road. And most recently, Kalos. That was all to save the world, for others, not only for myself. This place is just too quiet and tranquil. If I stay too long, the shadows grow and won't let me sleep. When I'm out on the road, I have things to focus on, to think about. It gives a purpose when I feel lost. All you think about is being alone for those few months. While those few months give me peace of mind. And then, if we're all about selfishness, isn't it selfish you don't ever want to talk about my father, no matter how many times I ask, or how nicely? The world is not your responsibility. You are my baby. I tried so hard. Failed so many times. Prayed to the gods. Then finally, I had you. And you want to throw all that away. You were a miracle. My miracle. And it's like you don't even care how I feel. As for your father, why would I talk about him? I thought we were happy, then he left on a journey when you were younger. The first few months he would call occasionally, then after a while he just stopped. Not a word. Even now. And you've been on your journey for almost 10 years. How could I tell you something I don't know myself? Ash stood there, studying her with eyes as sharp as a dragon-type's claws. She thought she had it right? He couldn't help but scowl at her, the fiery rage. Now replaced by the deadly cold of ice. Perhaps that was better. Or worse. Maybe. It is not my responsibility. But it is not right to leave others in peril, if I have the power or the chance to help. That's called selflessness. Maybe you should learn what the word means, he snarled. He dodged past her, bolting for the door, and Pikachu leapt after him without a sound, led by instinct and habit more than any sort of command to follow. The electric mouse leapt onto his shoulder, just as he reached the stairs leading down to the kitchen and to the front door. Ash threw his friend a grateful glance and then, taking the stairs by two, bolted from the house. Ash ran, like a crazed legendary was on his heels, again. He didn't even know where he was going. His only thought was to get away from the house. By the time he slowed to look around, he noticed he'd even passed the professor's lab and was instead closer to his childhood friend's house. Ash rubbed his face and trudged towards the nice little home. Perhaps he'd be lucky today, despite everything, and 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 hadn't yet set off on his next research mission. Foot bouncing in erratic rhythm on the porch, he knocked on the door, praying to whoever was willing to listen today that his friend was home. He didn't even need to be free enough to talk. Ash just needed some company. Well, some other than Pikachu. It felt a little unfair that he always dumped all the emotional sheet on the little electric type. The door opened and his friend blinked at him in slight surprise. Ash? Nice to see you, but can I crash here for today? Please, 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘. 𝙲𝚑𝚘 blinked like a hoot, but then stepped aside. Sure. You're home here, you know. Now, tell me what happened, please. Ash sighed and kicked down his shoes as 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 nodded towards the living room. A drink? Ash gave a tired smile. Neither of them were the type to drink, despite Kanto natives being allowed to do so at the age of legal adult age here was 10, but it seemed actual adults weren't completely out of their mind to allow a fresh-on-the-road squirt to drink. Not that 12 was so much better, but that had horrified some of his traveling companions, but Ash didn't care for that. He wasn't the one to drink anyway, because that dulled your senses and slowed you down. Not something he could allow when he was running for his life or saving the world, or both, at least once a month. If 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 was offering despite them not usually indulging, he must look like sheet. A sake, if you have any, he said. Make yourself at home. And Ash did so. He darted into the living room and opened the window to feel less trapped and then tossed himself onto the old, but comfortable couch. He just found his place, when his friend returned with a small tray, 2 servings of sake on it. So, what happened this time? Your grandfather asked me if I could do him a favor, taking Pokemon eggs to his cousin in Alola. 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 hummed, taking his shot. Ash reached for his own. Yeah, he told me. Asked if I had the free time to do it, but I have to set out tomorrow and it's on a time limit, he grimaced. I take, he asked you? Yeah, he downed the alcohol, swirling it in his mouth only for a blink. I said yes. So, I'll be setting off soon myself. She didn't like it. 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 sighed heavily. Merciful Mew? What did she do this time? 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 was the only one who knew what his relationship with his mother was, and that as the years passed and he grew older, their differences became more and more glaring. Ash rolled his eyes. I just got home, she said. Wants me to stay. Called me irresponsible and selfish, forever on the road, not even letting sweet Pikachu rest, he grumbled with air quotes at the end. 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 hummed, placing his glass down. While out on his trainer journey, and then finding his way as a professor-to-be, he kept an eye on the international news. And he'd not encountered trainers so often in said international news, as Satoshi. Seriously. At this point, it was a surprise he wasn't as world-famous as the world monarch from Galar. And even as a researcher for Project Mew, he'd never met as many legendary Pokemon as Ash seemed to meet in a month, much less in over a decade. She said I don't care for my Pokemon and that I don't care for her feelings either, chasing dreams on the road like father. 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 winced. That was a low blow from the woman. He'd never met a trainer as pure-hearted and caring as Ash. Once, he and Ash had their differences, but then again, he had been an entitled 10-year-old brat. Sure, Satoshi had also been a 10-year-old brat at one point, just without the entitlement. They'd learned and grown out of it and became real friends. Now, looking back on him talking down on Ash until the Indigo League, seemed, well, stupid. Utterly stupid. But which kid didn't make stupid mistakes? On top of the Pokemon thing, he also knew the topic of his father was sensitive to Ash. Mainly because even if the man was dead, his mother never talked about Red. And that was a name both of them only knew because his grandfather had slipped up that once. Gods above, 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 huffed, patting his friend's shoulder. I'm sorry. If it makes things easier, you can sleep here. I'll talk to the family and then you can set off from here. That would be nice, though. My stuff's still in the house. And I want to take a couple of my Pokemon, too. They're still at home. He nodded slowly in understanding. Then, stay for dinner, spend the night and then go home early to pack up. I'm sure grandfather wouldn't mind giving those eggs earlier, so you can set off. Ash gave him a strained smile. Thanks, 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘. Wait, is anyone home? He shook his head. Not yet. They'll be back later, so I'll make us some dinner and make a quick call so mine won't be surprised seeing you crashing the couch. Ash gave him a grateful smile, but the usually lively golden brown eyes were still dull. It was disturbing to see his usually laid-back, optimistic friend so down. Like, he'd been washed and then wrung for way too long. Shigeru stood up and sighed. Seriously, he never understood Hanako Ketchum. Sure, Pallet Town wasn't big and everyone knew how her new husband never came back from that journey he'd set off on, just months before their son was born. But she's being unreasonable. Ash was never good at staying in one place. Too much energy, too much to see and do. Staying idle just isn't him. Just like Pikachu. Besides, he's a world-renowned trainer by now. Something not even his father could claim. If what little grandfather shared was true. After 2 calls, one to his father and one to his grandfather, Shigeru got some dinner ready and was about to get the food over to the living room, when he heard the slow, haunting melody. He perked up, eyes snapping in the direction of the living room. He blinked like a hoot-hoot. Seemed like today Ash wanted to dump him with information. When did energetic Satoshi Ketchum sit long enough to learn any sort of instrument? Plus, it was hauntingly beautiful. He was skilled. He shook his head and grabbed the food and the plates. He could interrogate his friend about that later once his mood was better. As he made it back to the living room, he saw Ash just lowering a nice seashell to his lap. Was that the one you played? He asked, dumbfounded. Ash nodded, gently placing the shell into his pocket. It's been with me since 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 Island. A bit of a reminder. Shigeru snorted as he offered an empty plate and placed the bowl of food on the little table. Only you'd collect souvenirs from times when you saved the world from destruction. The other trainer shrugged. Hey, I saved us. Plus, I like the song. It's calming. Nice one, actually. 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 song, his friend said, as he spooned food onto his plate. It healed him when the birds turned on him, and later it broke the effect of their powers. And of course, you memorized it, Shigeru said playfully, rolling his eyes. Ash's lips curled upwards. Every single note. Could play at any time. For a little while, they ate in silence. Shigeru saw his friend relax and just a tiny bit of the usual shine returning into his eyes, and he couldn't help but send a prayer of thanks to any deity that was listening. Whenever Ash was like that, it was like the world was ready to freeze and crumble into chaos. At least, that was the feeling that got hold of him, whenever he saw Ash upset, and it wasn't a feeling he relished. There was a distant rumble of thunder and the younger oak looked out the window. Clear blue sky and white, fluffy clouds. Another rumble. He scrunched his brows in confusion. It didn't seem like a storm was coming? Ash's head snapped up at the sound as well. Another, this time louder and clearer. Coming from closer. Ash hurriedly swallowed the last of his food and muttered a thanks. Sliding the plate onto the small table, he jumped out the open window into the backyard and Shigeru jumped onto his feet. Hey, Ketchum, what the F are you? He called after his friend, now thoroughly confused and concerned. And then? 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 landed in the backyard. Shigeru coughed, the last bite almost. He swallowed hard, eyes pinned on the glimmering white and blue scaled Pokemon. He shoved his plate to the side and hurried to the window and froze when his childhood friend hugged the master of the legendary birds. Who the hell goes around hugging literal gods? Apparently his best friend. After several long moments, Ash pulled away from the beast of the sea, stroking 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘's snout, earning an affectionate purr. Or was it a growl? He couldn't be sure. Hey, Ash, he called, his mind finally kicking into gear again. Why is 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 in our backyard? How? Ash turned to him, his body entirely pressed against the Pokemon god, like some sort of hug. I may have forgotten to mention the song I played is also a sort of beacon, he asked sheepishly. So, whenever he can, he follows it and comes to me. Shigeru took a big, calming breath and then released it. 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘's sharp red eyes settled on him and he tried not to crumble under the weight of the gaze. You know what? If he hadn't been spotted, I'm not going to make a big deal out of this. Just, he made a gesture at the backyard, please don't ruin it much. Ash grinned at him, like he'd just pressed the world coronation's golden cup into his waiting hands. Thanks, Shige. At least get me some scales, for Project Mew, Shigeru murmured under his breath, that would get me some extra points. Seeing 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 seemed to ease Ash's tension. Calm the sea of raging emotion the way not even listening to him rant could. So, Shigeru didn't say anything and let his friend have some privacy with 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. Hours later, Ash came back inside, much calmer than ever before. He wasn't back to his bouncy self, but he was closer. So Shigeru didn't mention the legendary's random visit, because Ash apparently knew a way to summon him. They spent the remnants of the night talking about Pokemon and their plans for the near future as well as watching a movie. Ash left early. Shigeru was barely awake, actually. But he looked much better. Call sometimes, okay? He called after his friend, hugging a steaming cup of coffee. Ash nodded, sliding on his other shoe. Of course I will. Wish you luck with your studies. Shigeru saw his friend out and then shuffled towards the living room to clean up after last night, and what he found on the little table made him blink. Two massive scales, one pearlescent white, the other blue, like the deep sea, Ash's messy letters under them. Lugia's. He said you better use what you learn from the scales and from the project for good or he'll come after you. Shigeru couldn't help the hysterical snickers that rose from his throat. Satoshi 𝚘𝚘𝚘 was capable of even the impossible, without breaking a sweat. 2 weeks after meeting ∞ 𝚘𝚘𝚘 Island. Gladion sat on the edge of the cliff, the warm sunlight caressing his skin. ∞ was as quiet as ever. But, unlike usually, the blonde wasn't really focused on that, as his thoughts kept wandering. In fact, his thoughts had been a bit all over the place since that impromptu visit to Kalos. His mother had wanted it to be a sort of punishment for him, for causing trouble, as she'd phrased it. But, unknown to 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘, that visit to Kalos had been anything but. In fact, she had played into his hand. Or it was some weird game of fate he could not hope to understand as a mere mortal. After all, what human understood the whims and desires of legendary Pokemon, whose powers governed human life and fate? There was one such human, but Gladion Ether had no way of knowing that in that very moment. Not yet. Standing across from Ash, their chosen Pokemon circling each other in the momentary lapse in the fight, Gladion felt nothing but absolute excitement. No one in Alola could match him as easily as this 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 was doing. Without even breaking a sweat. Lycanroc had the advantage, yet. Lycanroc, use Crunch. Lycanroc howled and launched at 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘, biting into the dragon type mercilessly. Gladion couldn't help the small smile that crossed his face. The previous Swords Dance powered up Lycanroc, and so, the move even had more power behind it than usual. Ash grit his teeth, but he hadn't lost his cool yet. Impressive, Gladion had to admit. He'd only seen world-renowned trainers and champions, who were so collected even in the face of the possibility of losing. Come on 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘, you can break free and then use, Ash called, and the fiery determination in his gaze made Gladion freeze. 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 pushed back, instead of giving up, growling and glaring at the still-clinging Lycanroc. And then there was the light. Faint blue glow hugged the dragon type, making all of them perk up. Then the Pokemon's form changed and grew. The blue light dissipated with the evolution complete. Gladion stared with wide eyes. The newly evolved Garchomp roared fiercely and pushed Lycanroc off roughly. Garchomp! Ash looked as surprised as Gladion felt, but a moment later a smirk crossed the Kantonian's face. You're awesome. Now show me your strength. We're not done yet. Lycanroc, use Outrage. Best weapon against a dragon type was dragon type. Lycanroc howled, his eyes glowing red as the move took effect, and he jumped to impressive heights, to reach Garchomp, who suddenly changed directions as the blue-purple energy covered him, forming a faint outline of a skeletal dragon. Oh, Dragon Rush. Nice. Ash called, and Gladion watched in morbid awe as the newly evolved Pokemon pushed Lycanroc into the ground, knocking him out cold. The resulting explosion from the move's energy was big enough for the blast of wind to push him backwards. So, he wasn't surprised to find Lycanroc unable to battle once the massive dust cloud cleared. Gladion shook his head to chase away the memory. The heated fight still brought a smile to his face. At one point, it had even looked like he might win, until 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 evolved. And well, even before that, Ash had been doing well, despite it looking like he would end up losing. The Kantonian did say type advantages were not everything and strategy counted too, and Gladion knew that. Still, seeing it firsthand, in such a ∞ manner too. But then again, he had not finished the trials either. And the one he had taken, he won. The Rockium Z was the proof of it. Lycan, the call of his Pokemon snapped the ether air from his musings. Gladion glanced at Lycanroc and patted the Pokemon's paw. They'll be fine, he said. We'll see them again, I'm sure. Rock, Lycanroc. I should not even be asking this, Gladion frowned, feeling out of his depth, as he looked at Rockruff scrambling all over the Kantonian, liking him. You're not asking, Ash chuckled. He took a liking to me. This happened before, so I'm not surprised. Gladion raised an eyebrow. Are you serious? Just ask Pikachu, the trainer chuckled, playfully batting away the puppy Pokemon's enthusiastic show of affection. Gladion looked at the electric type perched on a rock, sunbathing next to Garchomp. Pikachu looked up and nodded to him. Pika, Pikachu. Gladion didn't speak Pokemon like Ash seemed to, but he got the gist of what Pikachu was trying to get across. Random wild Pokemon taking to his trainer like Rockruff had, wasn't alien to him. Now, wasn't that one thing he picked up from the other just in a few hours? Referring to the Pokemon with proper pronouns as Ash called it. It helped that somehow? Ash nailed the gender of his Pokemon or any Pokemon, it seemed better than even Nurse Joy, after a thorough health check. I owe you one, Gladion said slowly, looking back at Ash. He wasn't treated well, but if my mother were to find this one with me. Ash rolled his eyes, shifting his grip on the energetic Rockruff, to have the little rock type settle into his arm. I get it. You saved a Pokemon from being mistreated, but since they wouldn't believe you, it's still theft. Gladion nodded grimly. Yes. I'm just sorry that this one didn't seem to have a trainer. On one hand, no upset trainer about their stolen Rockruff. On another? I'm just giving you trouble. You're not, Ash said, his tone like a steel type's armor. I always help Pokemon when I can. This is no exception. Thank you, Gladion said sincerely. Ash nodded. Don't worry about it. We'll visit you in Alola when we can. I just need to be done here first. Gladion nodded, offering a folded piece of paper. A parting gift as thanks for everything. What's this? Ash asked curiously. There's a man in coastal Kalos who used to live in Alola. He'd been a sort of acquaintance before he moved away. He knows about ride Pokemon. Your Garchomp could be one, you just need the gear. He can have it done for you. If you'd like. Ash's eyes went wide in surprise, but he took the folded paper. Thank you, Gladion. They shared a parting glance, but didn't speak. They'll see each other again, that was for sure. Gladion watched the city sprawling beneath the hill, his fingers absent-mindedly playing with Lycanroc's fur. Strange for Lycanroc to allow that. But well, he wasn't going to look a gift wrap at Ash in the teeth. We'll see them again, I'm sure, he whispered to the wind. He wasn't sure if he was trying to convince himself or his Pokemon. Few days later somewhere above Alola. The day was beautiful for a flight. The sky was clear blue, just like the ocean below, and the sun was shining brightly, a few cirrus clouds floating around. Ash leaned forward in his saddle, patting Garchomp on the neck, as he spotted the nearest island. Do you think you could land there, please? He nodded towards the island below. Having an aura bond with his Pokemon was a blessing, especially since he could communicate with them without having to speak, which was an edge in battle and definitely came in handy in moments like this one. And it wasn't even cheating. Diantha capitalized on her Gardevoir's psychic powers to communicate wordlessly. This was the same, just with a different link. Of course, Garchomp agreed readily, though his eyes darted to the other surrounding islands too. Do you know which one's this? I think that's Melee, the trainer mused, as Garchomp tucked his wings in to dive. Pika! Pikachu screamed, as Garchomp fell. Ash grabbed his starter with one hand, preventing his best friend from falling, flattening against the mock Pokemon's ride gear as much as he could. After a several-minute high-speed dive, Garchomp snapped his wings open, slowing into a graceful glide just below the impressive canopy. You, Pikachu hissed mentally. Not everyone can fly, Garchomp. Sorry, the dragon ground type apologized, as he dodged a tree. Ash rolled his eyes at his friend's banter. Well, Garchomp bordered more on a kid, given Ash practically raised him. Though, if that was the case, 𝚲𝚘𝚘 took the trophy. He'd been with Ash since he was an egg. Please guys, no fighting, Ash huffed mentally, as Garchomp dodged another tree. Where? Do you want me to land? Satoshi hummed thoughtfully. He'd come here for a vacation. From sporadic tales told by Lugia, the heart of the islands housed the shrines of the four Tapu. He didn't feel like meeting any legendary Pokemons today, to be tackled for whatever reason. Ash nudged his friend through the gear and Garchomp rose above the greenery with rapid wing beats, as the trainer's brown eyes studied the place. Just the smallest drop of aura directed to his eyes and his sight was as sharp as a Staraptor's. Look! I think that spot where the beach and the forest meet is perfect. All right, Garchomp agreed, gliding over. Deeming the spot safe and comfortable, Garchomp landed with a small thud. The moment he touched down, Pikachu leapt from Ash's grip, glaring at the dragon type with flattened ears. Ash rolled his eyes at the sight, as he slipped from the saddle, already working on taking down the ride gear. Please, no fighting, Ash sighed, lifting off the heavy saddle. Garchomp purred happily and curled up to rest. Thanks for the ride. No problem. I know it wasn't a short one. Garchomp hummed. But nothing I can't handle. What's the plan now? Ash shrugged. Getting up camp and looking around. Also, I'll probably let out Greninja too, he said with a chuckle. Ash reached to his belt and clicked down the only Pokeball that still had a Mon inside. Pikachu never used his ball. The only time he tolerated a Pokeball was when Ash destroyed the one Oak had given him all those years ago and caught Pikachu in a new ball, solely registered to him. Ash smiled fondly at the pink-yellow heel ball and tossed it into the air. After the trying few weeks in Kalos, switching the ball for Greninja had become a priority, the moment he was near civilization again. And honestly? Ash was not one to use specific Pokeballs, but he was glad he'd made the decision this time. And then it was only fair that Garchomp who stayed, got the same treatment. And well, likely, the Pokemon he caught here, if any, would get the same. Come on out. The ball opened with a flash and then he caught it, as Greninja leapt to land next to Pikachu. Ninja. Nice to see you out too, Ash agreed. Now, let's set up camp. Who gets food? Ninja, Greninja. Alright, Greninja. Just keep an eye out, okay? This isn't Kalos anymore, he warned. The ninja Pokemon nodded in agreement and disappeared into the forest. Days of calm and silence. Just what he wanted. Camping out with his Pokemon, exploring the vicinity of their camp, and enjoying the sunlight. No humans around. No world-ruling, crazy madmen, or enraged legendaries. Just him, Pikachu, Garchomp and Greninja. He still couldn't believe he'd camped out more in the Kalos wilderness after he'd left Clement, Bonnie, and Serena behind. Any sane person would have hightailed it out of the DMN region after the whole Lysandra mess. But Squishy had asked for Greninja's help and Ash wasn't going to leave one of his own, when he just traveled to the next place. Nah, not even if Giratina unleashed his distortion world on Earth. Plus, as useful as the battle bond was, it had side effects. Nasty ones. Ash didn't want to find out the possibly nastiest side effect through long-term separation from Greninja. Nope. No matter what Kasumi said, he wasn't a total dunce. Seems like someone had been gracious enough in the Hall of Origins to discourage the alpha Pokemon from pouring sheet over his head when he was supposed to be on a vacation. Thanks, Lugia, he muttered contentedly, sunbathing like a leaf eon. Honestly, the only truly sane legendary was the Beast of the Sea. Ash made a mental note to leave him some gifts once they were outside of Alola. Alola's waters were solely Tapu Fini's territory. The sun was shining and the sky was clear. Ash sighed contentedly, as Pikachu sprawled on his stomach in the soft grass. Perfect vacation. The next morning, Ash woke with his heart hammering mercilessly against his ribcage as he recalled the main reason for his arrival in Alola. After he and Greninja finally deemed Kalos safe and clean of the Vilevines, he hopped on the earliest plane, this time for real, and flew back to Kanto. His mother and Professor Oak had been glad to see him, asking what took him so long, as the league of which he'd been the runner-up had ended quite a while ago. Not a talk he wanted to repeat. Ever. And he almost forgot to deliver the Pokemon eggs. Oho's feathers. The professor's going to kill him. If not, well, he'll never live this one down with the man's grandson. Shigeru's going to laugh himself silly over this. Satoshi? Is everything alright? Ash turned and saw Greninja just making his way back from wherever he darted off to with food for them for breakfast. The trainer flashed a grateful megawatt smile at his Kalosian starter and rubbed his face. I was so caught up in taking a break and maybe looking for Gladion to surprise him with the visit, that I forgot about the Pokemon eggs. I really need to deliver those. Well, if it's any help, we're not so far away from what I think is a city. Maybe there, the humans can give you directions, the ninja Pokemon offered. That's a good idea, Ash nodded, standing up. Now, how about a quick training session until the others wake up? And then I'll cook us breakfast. Sounds good to me, Greninja agreed, activating Night Slash to create their weapons for the spar. Ash took a breath and reached down for his aura, only for the energy to surge to the surface hot and thick like lava. Surprised and momentarily overwhelmed, Ash stumbled, gasping for air. Satoshi? Greninja called in concern, taking a step closer. Ash took a deep breath and then another to rain the flames of raging blue that seemed to surge up from within. I'm okay, he answered telepathically, trying to see if the sudden strange occurrence ruined his control. Just the aura, it was almost overwhelming. The one time this happened was the very first time I used it, saving the Tree of Life. Greninja eyed him contemplatively before answering. It's probably this place. It practically oozes aura. I only felt this when I was near Zygarde, but now, this whole place is doused in the power of whatever legendaries preside over the land. Ash snorted. I sincerely hope we're not running into any legendary Pokemon while here, or I'm throwing sheet and finding a way to burn the Hall of Origins to a crisp. Greninja gave him a look. Maybe you're better off not saying this in front of Pikachu, because he'd jump at the chance to do it. Wouldn't you? The shinobi frog gave him a sharp look. I trust you in everything. I do a lot of things for you, but excuse me, I'm still younger than Pikachu and I do still have respect for legendaries. Ash rolled his eyes. A mistake, if you ask me, he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for Greninja to hear. Soon, you'll learn the error of your ways, and you'll learn to give a shit about what they want. Greninja huffed, offering one of the dark blades, and Ash reached out, expecting his aura control to be shot again. Instead, his fingers wrapped around the weapon without problems. The trainer scrunched his nose. Wonderful, the place is messing with my aura. Don't forget that you suppressed it for a long time. As startlingly gifted you are for a human. It's still a skill that needs practice. Just like your use of weapons. Ash sighed and took the basic offensive stance 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 taught him. Greninja gave an appreciative nod and a moment later, launched at him. Ash raised his blade to block the attack and then shifted to push the water type back. Greninja struck swiftly, but Ash sensed the attack and danced back just in time to avoid his shirt being opened by his Pokemon's blade. It seemed like today's session would be fun, too. Professor Akamu Kukui was walking through the woods behind his home. Well, calling it behind his home was a stretch in this case, but whatever. He couldn't sleep, so he'd come to the forest for a walk. Rockruff had been missing for weeks now, and it was putting him on edge. Technically, he'd never caught the puppy Pokemon, but they were friends. Sort of. As much as a human could be friends with a wild Pokemon. Rockruff, not coming to get the Pokemon food left for it the first few times, made him think that perhaps it was off to evolve and that maybe he'd see the wolf Pokemon again sometime, next as a Lycanroc. But that hadn't been the case, and now. Arceus DMN it. Kukui paused, surprised to hear such curses echo on Melee in Alola. Sure, Kalos wasn't too far away, but tourists usually weren't out in the wild like that. Clashes echoed, and Kukui hurried his steps. It seemed like a foreigner might be in need of help. And as the local professor it was his duty to help. Besides, few on the island spoke any foreign languages. Perhaps the Kahuna, but he wasn't sure which of them and what language. He clipped down a pokeball from his belt, in case it was needed. A short sprint later, breaking through the thick greenery wasn't easy, he reached a clearing. And what he saw made his blood freeze. A young adult or more like a kid, he couldn't be older than the kids in his class, was fighting with a Greninja. Like, literally fighting it. What craziness was the world descending into, if trainers literally fought their Pokemon, 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 least that explained the 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 curses. He could be from the neighboring region. The Greninja stuck again, with what Kukui guessed was 𝚞/, if he remembered the Pokemon's likeliest moves correctly. He flung his Pokeball. Incineroar, use Darkest Lariat, he commanded, the moment his faithful starter caught sight of the foreign water type. Incineroar leapt forward, his hand-like paws covered in reddish-orange flames, as the move took effect. And from then on? Kukui decided. Things just got crazier. Was he caught in some nasty move of a psychic type? This definitely felt like some nightmare. Or an illusion. The trainer and the Greninja moved like mirror images of one another, and wasn't that sheer craziness? A human having the deadly grace of a Pokemon? And as the two parted to quarrel Incineroar, Kukui noticed. It was a blade in the trainer's hand, and Tapu's mercy? Is that a 𝚞/blade in his hand too? How in the name of Necrozma? The attack struck, and the lariat was broken. The trainer let his hand drop and the dark blade flickered from his grip as he rounded on the scene before him. Greninja, Water Shuriken. The shinobi frog created two small shuriken and hurled them at Incineroar, sending his partner flying. Kukui could only stare. And stare. And then the trainer rounded on him. Merciful Tapu Lele, was he young? And those golden brown eyes burned with incredible, disbelieving fury. Oh, for the love of Kyogre. What's wrong with Alolan people? Attacking without a proper battle challenge. Has island life or the seafood addled your minds or something? Kukui's jaw dropped, as the Greninja instead brandished its weapon right at him, despite the fact that Incineroar hadn't moved yet. Upon seeing the threat, his Pokemon stood with a growl, heat radiating from his body. Kukui held up a hand to stop his faithful friend and instead studied the younger trainer. You weren't in trouble? He asked in slight confusion, as his eyes flicked to the Greninja. It was completely still next to the young man, watching them, ready to spring into action. Strange contrast to the scene of it attacking the boy. Possibly its own trainer. Kukui winced at that. Unruly starters were the bane of all rookie trainers, even if this one didn't look like a rookie at all. The young male glared, crossing his arms. Of course, I wasn't. Greninja's my Pokemon. Why would he attack me? We were training, he huffed in annoyance, giving Kukui such a stink eye as if he just, well, said his dead relatives had. Unsavory professions. Kukui's jaw went slack. You call that training? The kid rolled his eyes. Of course. It's good training for Greninja to moderate the strength of his attacks. Plus, who better teach me hand-to-hand and weapon handling than the one known by Kalos as the Ninja Pokemon? It's useful. Kukui blinked and then rubbed his face. Legendaries above. What was the world turning into? He heaved a heavy sigh and then wordlessly recalled Incineroar after a brief nod. He turned back to the young male. In that case, my apologies. Name's Akamu Kukui and I'm Alola's regional professor. The foreigner eyed him a little distrustfully, but he halted his Greninja with the briefest glance. The water starter took a step back. Well-trained one, in contrast to what he'd assumed at first. The younger trainer nodded in acknowledgement, as he patted his Greninja on the arm. The contact seemed to relax the wary animal, just a little. Satoshi Ketchum of Pallet Town, Kanto. And I believe, Professor, that you can help me. Kukui tried his best not to think of how a Kantonian spoke Kalosian without the briefest hint of accent. He learned Kalosian years ago and along with Anovian, used the language actively in his work, especially when he had to make big publishings or give a presentation in another region. He still could not speak either language without his Alolan accent. And then, there was this young teen, speaking Kalosian like a native. Kukui studied the Kantonian as the young man headed back to his camp. The Greninja lingered just on the edge of his vision, making it clear that the smallest attempt at harming the trainer will result in consequences. And there was something in the younger trainer. Something peculiar but powerful. Something that Kukui, despite his many years of experience as a professor and trainer himself, could not put a finger on. Why, didn't you check into one of Mele's hotels? He asked, honestly curious. The young man was dressed practically. The clothing of one who was often on the road. Slightly worn black-red sport shoes of a brand Kukui faintly knew was known for quality over quantity. Black, long trousers, with a thin black shirt. On top of that, a short-sleeve blue zip shirt with white accents. And a red-black cap. I prefer the quiet of a forest to teeming, loud tourist cities, Satoshi said, as they ducked past a particularly thick line of trees. And beyond was the small camp. A Garchomp, a Pikachu and, to his utter surprise, a Rockruff at camp, the Pikachu corralling the puppy Pokemon from wandering too far. Seeing the little rascal rolling in the grass with the Pikachu made his heart pang, wondering where the little wild guy was, who'd visited him so faithfully until weeks ago. Oh, you caught a Rockruff already? No, Satoshi waved him off. Just, an acquaintance was in a pinch and left Rockruff with me. I promised him I'll get Rockruff back to him when we meet next. So once I get my things straightened for Professor Oak, I'll be returning the little guy. Kukui blinked. Oh, nice of you. He watched the trainer grab the Pokeball and recall Rockruff, just before the little canine could bite the Pikachu's ear. Both remaining Pokemon looked up at that, the Garchomp letting out a threatening growl. Kukui went stockstill. Aggravating a dragon type, especially a protective one, was never good. Satoshi walked over to the Garchomp and whispered something to it in Kantonian, which had the Pokemon calming down. Just let me grab my belongings, the trainer called, this time in fluent Kalosian. Take your time, he said, marveling at the ease with which the boy switched between languages. Something to envy him for. He packed everything in his backpack, little as that was, and cleaned the sight of camping evidence, attaching another small bag to the Garchomp's saddle. Kukui blinked slowly, rubbing his eyes just to make sure he was seeing things right. But there it was. A ride saddle on the Garchomp. Did I miss the other regions starting to employ ride Pokemon as well? Ash huffed in amusement. No. We really don't do that, minus a few people. Ride an Arcanine or maybe a Charizard or a Garchomp. But not with saddles. Yet, you have one, Kukui pointed out a little disbelievingly. A saddle, I mean. I told you I have an Alolan acquaintance. He told me about ride Pokemon and gave me contact with a man who made the saddle for Garchomp. Which came in handy, since, well, Garchomp only recently evolved, during the last days of my stay in Kalos. I did not have the chance or the time to learn riding like that. Champion Cynthia might be able to ride her Garchomp without a saddle, but she had that Pokemon for longer than I even had Gibble. I see. Well, now that you packed up, can I treat you to lunch? Ash hummed, raising an eyebrow. Whatever for? Not that I'd say no, but I did just attack you while you were training, the professor said, sheepishly rubbing the back of his neck. An apology is due, at least. It's not strictly necessary, but I also have the good manners not to turn down such an offer, Ash said in slight amusement. It would also help that you're around, since I don't really speak Alolan. Well then, off we go, Kukui said, gesturing the way he'd come from. And tomorrow, you can come with me to deliver those eggs to Principal Oak. Ash walked next to the professor the next morning, each of them carrying an egg to be delivered to the Melee Pokemon school. So, what will you be doing after this? Ash shrugged. I might look around the island for a little. Exploring and interacting with Pokemon doesn't necessarily require me to speak the language. Because, I doubt there are many like you who speak 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. The professor chuckled. You're right. I only know a handful of people who speak it and one of them's a student of mine. As they crossed the gate to the school, Ash faltered for a moment, his eyes drinking in the sight. The place looked like a kind of paradise, even if it shot his meager aura control to the distortion world. That was FING annoying. He'll have to sit down and meditate to have it back to normal. If his aura went haywire during his little stay here, that'll drive him crazy. And Arceus knew what effect that would have on the bond, if it was ever needed. As they walked into the building, they ran into a green-haired girl with a tiny, fruit-like Pokemon he didn't recognize. Pikachu's ears perked up in interest at the sight and the girl squealed. Ash raised an eyebrow. What's with her? Oh, I'm sorry, Ash. This is Mallow. One of my students. And, you see, Pikachu aren't that common a sight in Alola. I only know of 2 people on Melee who own a member of the Pikachu line. Ah, I see, he nodded in greeting to the girl, who then asked something. Kukui answered in Alolan and Ash pinched the bridge of his nose in annoyance. Obviously, he was the topic or Pikachu. And he didn't like not understanding the conversation. Kukui then said something else to Mallow and that had the girl nodding and running off somewhere down the corridor. I'm sorry, Kukui said sheepishly. It must be off-putting not to understand what people are saying. Ash shook his head. Ah, not something I hadn't encountered before. You get used to it, after some time, he waved the man off. Seriously, though, maybe he should keep Rockruff around while he could, so the puppy Pokemon could translate for him? That would come in handy, even if people looked weirdly at him. He'd long learned to disregard that. Ever since that had come to light, well, he didn't care about what was weird or not. Kukui opened a door for him and Ash slipped in. Principal, I have a visitor today, Kukui announced in 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘, gesturing to the man. Oh? Good day, young man, the principal greeted back, also in 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘, for which Ash was grateful. One less person he needed an interpreter for. Ash placed the egg container he was holding on the desk. Good day, I'm Satoshi 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 from Pallet Town. Your cousin, Professor Yukinari sent me with these eggs. The man lit up. Ah yes. I've talked to him. Thank you for bringing the eggs to me. I'll call him in a moment to share the good news that you made it here. Also, Principal, Kukui spoke up, drawing the man's attention. It's Ash's first time in Alola. Maybe he could stay to look around the school. If you'd like, that is, the professor said, turning to him. Ash hummed thoughtfully, glancing at Pikachu. What do you think, buddy? It could be nice. This is a new region. And I know you didn't come for the journey, but yeah, we agree, he hummed, stroking his friend's short fur, his fingers feeling out the tiny scar bumps. They'd gone through a lot over the years, practically growing up together on the road, and some of those adventures left scars on them both. Physical, mental, or sometimes, both. I'd like that very much, thank you, he answered with a polite bow. Also, is it a problem Pikachu's not in a Pokeball? He's not exactly a fan. Not at all, the principal waved him off with a cordial smile. Trainer and Pokemon attend the school together. Many of our students' Pokemon are outside the ball, as long as they don't disrupt the classes. I'm sure that won't be a problem, Ash said. After another few words were exchanged, they left the principal in his office and headed for Kukui's classroom. However, before they stepped into the classroom, Ash stopped and released the only native Pokemon he currently had on him. In a flash of blue, Rockruff appeared and Ash knelt down to him, rubbing the pup's head. Hello, Rockruff. Hello, the puppy stopped and then sniffed the air, clear blue eyes going wide. He jumped to Kukui and greeted him with happy barks, surprising the professor. The professor seemed surprised and then he bent down to mutter something to the puppy in Alolan. He's the human. He's the nice human I told you about, the puppy barked excitedly. Ash smiled and then reached out, pulling Rockruff off of the professor. I'm glad and we can talk about that later, but right now he has things to do and you can only listen and watch. Oh? But, Ash injected, rubbing the wolf pup. You can understand what the humans here talk about, right? Yeah. Though, some things just sound weird, the Pokemon said, tilting his head to the side. Ash hummed. That's okay. Just, please translate them for me as you hear. It might not be so weird to me, as I'm a human. And afterwards, we can play out in the sun and you can get food. Deal, Rockruff barked, panting happily. I like the food you make. Ash rolled his eyes. Human food wasn't exactly for Pokemon, but the little rascal had stolen some before. And apparently, he liked it. He grabbed Rockruff in a comfortable position, letting the puppy wriggle in his arms. "Ha, you're Rockruff," the professor said. Ash hummed. "He's not exactly mine, but whatever. I just know he doesn't like being confined to the Pokeball too long. So, can he and Pikachu stay out during class?" Kukui nodded understandingly. "Of course. Now, come on." Kukui briefly introduced him to the class of children, and Ash gave his own introduction in 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. That immediately drew the attention of the blonde girl sitting to the right. She had pale blonde hair and bright green eyes that were startlingly familiar. The green-haired girl also perked up at his words. So maybe she knew at least some 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘? If yes, that will be a relief if the kids started bombarding him with questions. Gladion huffed. "My mother and sister dragged me here. They wanted some bonding time after mother was done with her business, but," he shivered, "I escaped." Ash studied her, intrigued. "Could it be?" The blonde called, dragging Ash from his thoughts. "Is something wrong, Mr. Ketchum?" Lily, if he remembered right. Hearing 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 from her was enough to startle Ash from his thoughts. Oh, so she was the one student who'd be able to understand him even without Kukui around. Ash shoved the tiny, useful piece of information to the side. "No, nothing. You just look similar to a friend, is all. I didn't mean to stare," he said calmly. "And I'm not that much older than you, from what I hear. Ash will do just fine." "Lily, was it?" She nodded. Before Ash could say anything, the tan boy with reddish hair called to Lily and told her something. She nodded and then turned back to Ash. Kiawe would like to know why you're here, in Alola. We don't see many foreigners around the school. The cousin of your principal is a friend of mine and he asked me to do a favor," he explained. "And I've never seen a school like yours in any regions I've been to before, so the principal and Professor Kukui had been nice enough to let me stay." Lily nodded and turned to her classmates to translate. Using the momentary freedom, Ash deadpanned at the professor. "If I want to hang around more than a couple of days in Alola, you have to teach me the language. I can't rely on you or your charming little student to translate for me." Kukui chuckled. "It's not a problem, but if you really want to stay for an extended PRD, I'll be glad to help you in learning Alolan. Although, it won't work overnight." Ash hummed. "I know that, though I assure you, I'm a quick study." Besides, there were factors at play Kukui didn't need to know about. Like how he could kind of practice even with Rockruff if the little Pokemon translated for him, when Kukui was too busy to do so. In that case, I'd be happy to help. Looked like he was headfirst into another mess of an adventure. Though, this was still better than going home to Pallet and having constant arguments with his mother over her trying to control his life. So, for now, Alola was just fine. Even if it meant having to learn a language he had little to no clue at all about. Once school let out, Ash approached the girl. Her aura was full of anxiety, but it was similar enough to the one he was looking for. Plus, they even looked alike. It was worth a shot. "Lily, could you spare me a moment?" His lucky day, that one of Kukui's students may just be connected to the person he wanted to find. Bonus points to Arceus being considerate enough to have the girl knowing 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. Small mercies. The little blonde paused as Ash approached, Pikachu and Rockruff playing by his feet. As the Pokemon goofed around, the girl backed up, but smiled at him. "What eye is it?" "Pikachu, Rockruff," he called to them, nudging both closer to himself with the smallest curl of aura. Pikachu immediately got the message and leapt onto his shoulder, taking his usual perch on the left side. Rockruff tilted his head to the side, confused, but darted to his side a moment later. With the Pokemon now farther from Lily, the girl seemed to relax. Interesting. Is she afraid of Pokemon? She'd been tense when the others allowed their partners to wander around in the break, too. His gaze wandered from the Pokemon duo back to the girl. "I'm looking for someone, and I have a feeling you might know him." "Who is it?" Ash picked up Rockruff from the ground, Pikachu expertly balancing on his shoulder not to fall off. Given, he'd had slightly over a decade to perfect said technique. "A certain Gladion ether." Her face morphed into a mask of complete surprise. "My brother?" Ash smiled inwardly. So I was right? As annoying as aura could be sometimes, it was also useful. Like how relatives shared similar physical appearance, they also shared similar aura signatures. "Do you know where I could find him?" Lily blinked owlishly and then shook her head. No, I'm sorry. The last time I've seen him for any amount of time was a while back, when we traveled to Kalos. Since we're back here, he's disappeared again. I've no clue where he might be." Ash clicked his tongue in annoyance. "Oh well. I'll have to resort to the old way, then. Thank you." He nodded to the girl, but she called after him. Wait. How do you know my brother? Ash tilted his head to the side, glancing behind his shoulder, giving her a playful eye roll. I've met him before, of course. Have a nice day. As he walked off, he didn't see Lily's annoyed pout, or her emerald eyes narrowed on his back. Ash stroked 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 snout. So Lily was Gladion's sister. It was not as surprising as he would have assumed, but it was still somewhat intriguing. Such a fierce trainer, and his sister, afraid of even being near Pokemon. Ash, where to? The master trainer turned to look at Kukui. Getting to know the place a bit more. And getting dinner. Would you like to spend the night at my house? I'm sure you sleep outside enough on the road. Technically, you're not on the road this time, so it would be nice to spend the night under a roof, no? I wouldn't want to intrude. Kukui rolled his eyes. Nonsense. You're not intruding. I'm offering. Ash thought only for a moment, looking at his Pokemon. Rockruff barked happily, jumping excitedly on 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘's saddle. Say yes, say yes. He's a nice human, I promise. Ash chuckled at the rock type's excitement and rubbed him behind the ear as he glanced at the other two. Pikachu and 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 both nodded their agreement and Ash turned back to the professor. I'd be glad to. And, would you please update my Pokédex with the local necessities? Kukui grinned. Gladly. Then, I'm cooking. The professor went wide-eyed. But you're the guest, Anne. Ash hummed. I insist. You're letting me spend the night and updating my dex. The least I can do is cook. Kukui rolled his eyes in amusement. Fine by me, if you so insist. Once they made it to the nice beachside home of the professor, Ash let out his Pokemon in the end he hadn't flown on 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘, and gave the team their daily food. While the little group of 4 were munching on their dinner, Kukui waved the trainer towards his basement. Come on in, let me start on the Pokédex. And while that gets updated, you can start on dinner, if you still want to be the one to cook. I insist, Professor. They took the stairs and Ash offered his 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 Pokédex to the man, who sat in his chair. Oh, the newest 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 model, isn't it? Yes. My latest journey took me through Kalos and I think I'm comfortable with this one. Can you update it? No problem, Kukui smiled, as he reached for a cable to connect the small portable device to his computer. As he did so, the first thing that flashed onto the computer was the trainer's ID. A picture of a much younger Ash, with the data right next to it in Anovian. 22XXXX 0025 X 304512 BY. And the dex. Registered recently, it seemed. After all, Sycamore worked in Kalos and Ash was a Kanto native. So, this had to be a new dex. And Ash had to know Sycamore too. 2 world-renowned profs he knew? What other surprises did the Kantonian have in store? What also caught his attention was a small but still recognizable crest on the upper corner, next to the trainer's name. Is that the sigil of the WCA? The professor thought in shock. However, before he had the chance to take a closer look, the screen was overtaken by climbing percentage numbers. So there, Kukui pushed his chair back. It's updating. How about some dinner while this one's ready? Ash nodded, whirling on his heels. I'll start. It won't take too long. I presume you hadn't tasted anything 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 before? Kukui shrugged. Once, some nice seafood from coastal Kalos, but that was all. Well, then. The next morning, Ash woke from his sleep and he immediately padded towards Kukui's kitchen to make coffee and breakfast. Kukui didn't seem to be the type to cook, anyway. And if he crashed at the professor's place for a day or two, until he found a place, well, cooking was the least he could do in return. He doubted the man would take the money. And oh boy, did Ash have money. Being a league champ and continuously saving the world made his bank account pretty fat with all the prizes he got. By the time Kukui peeked into the kitchen, 2 steaming cups of coffee were waiting and the eggs were frying. Morning. Coffee, he asked, gesturing at the one he hadn't touched. Oh, appreciated. Is that the smell of breakfast? Kukui asked, sniffing the air. Sure is. You didn't have to. Ash shrugged. But you let me stay, so I wanted to. They sat down and Kukui hummed appreciatively. Not bad. Certainly better than what I cook. So, your plan for today? Ash shrugged. Training and then seeing the island. This is supposed to be a bit of vacation for me, after all. Well, I have classes to teach, Kukui muttered. Have fun exploring. The Kantonian chuckled. Sure will. Darting back into the forest where he'd initially set up camp wasn't so hard. His aura was all over the place and his lack of control meant leaving a bigger imprint on places he'd been to. Following his own trail hadn't been too hard, considering he was a human torch of aura even on the best of days, and obviously, these weren't his best ones. Why, do you think the place messes with your aura so much? Pikachu asked. Ash shrugged, clicking the heal ball from his belt. Greninja said it's the island's own aura. If it's because of a local legendary? Well, I can't hope to override that. I can only get used to it and maintain control of my own power, despite everything. His Kalos starter appeared in a flash of blue-white and Ash lazily waved in greeting. Do you think we could go over some basic exercises? My aura's all over the place and if this keeps up, it might affect my everyday life, like before. The ninja Pokemon deadpanned at him. It will be even worse this time. You've kept all of it suppressed. Now it's free since Kalos. If you lose grip now, it could start affecting your surroundings visibly. Ash groaned miserably, as he thought about the days when his uncontrolled extra sense went haywire and reported danger, only for it to be a passing Sandile that was more afraid of them than they were of it. Could we, please? Greninja nodded. Of course. I'd be glad to help. We can try it here, or we can try finding. No. I don't know this place and I don't have the patience to look for a lake or river, no matter how useful that is. Ash shot him down before his Pokemon could finish. Well, then you just sit down and clear your thoughts. Reach inward for the aura. And Ash did so. Pikachu jumped from his shoulder and leapt a little further to curl under a tree's shade. Greninja sat and Ash copied the pose his Pokemon took, closing his eyes, as the 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 Pokemon's liquid syllables gently gave instructions to calm his breathing and try reaching for the aura. It wasn't as hard now, reaching that tranquil state as it had been for the first time. He was usually constantly on the move, that was his life. Because being stationary meant being back in Pallet and arguing with his mother. But slowly, the time since he had Greninja and especially when he stopped fighting against the bubbling aura, proved him otherwise. Silence and tranquility were as beneficial as moving forward. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. 4, 5, 6. Breathe out. An easy pattern. Repetitive. Calming. Don't fight the current of the new aura. Go with it. The waves crashed against each other, blue against blue, only a slight difference in shade. And the island's was naturally stronger. But he let Greninja's advice guide him. He didn't try to push away the coming wave, instead letting it take hold of him. And soon, he was surrounded by silence, the aura surrounding him like silk weaving in the wind, in rhythm with his breaths. He could sense Greninja right in front of him. And Pikachu several feet away, under the tree. He could even sense Garchomp and Rockruff contentedly curled in their Pokeballs. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. 4, 5, 6. Breathe out. There was water beneath, which wasn't water at all, but the pearlescent blue of his own aura. It moved gently in tandem with his every breath, but was otherwise motionless. Perfectly calm. When he opened his eyes, the world around him seemed clearer. Greninja seemed content, almost loose, sitting in his spot, while Pikachu let out a soft blissful, cha. Funny, how meditation had become a go-to thing to do, when his emotions and aura became hard to handle. Before. That had always been running. But then again, physical exercise consumed energy in all forms, so that had helped burn away the accumulating excess aura he had barely even wanted to acknowledge. Since he started training with Greninja, he learned to control the power, instead of just burning it away. And even just using it as a passive sixth sense was enough use, not to have it completely bottled up. Entirely bottled up, it had been like a ticking, critical hit future sight. I think, you have the aura calm enough, the ninja frog informed him, studying him with his head tilted to the side. Feeling better? Yes, actually, Ash said. And he did. He felt more focused and energized, even though he hadn't really been tired either. Greninja gave him an almost amused glance. It was a figurative question. I can feel it. Now, you'll just have to learn to keep that clear head at all times. Ash sighed as he stood up, mirroring his friend. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, but his legs were protesting against sitting so long. Easier said than done. I know. Humans aren't meant to handle the amount of aura you have. But practice. You want to try training? That could also help with keeping your aura in check. The trainer's lips curled into a mischievous grin matching a purloin. Yes. That always helps. Amusedly, Greninja formed 2 knight/blades, offering one to the human. Ash took it without hesitation. Thoroughly exhausted but feeling content, Ash let the blade fade from his hand. You were even better today than usual, Greninja noted with an approving nod. I've got a good sensei, he shot back jokingly, letting the Cantonese word slip into his 꽶𝚘𝚘𝚘. His Pokemon understood him anyway. Thank you. I haven't even heard of something like this occurring before, so we're learning together. That's what teamwork is about. Ash gestured for the duo to follow him, so Pikachu stood up from the grass where he'd been resting and joined them in a few leaps. You not coming up? Pikachu shook his head. I kind of snoozed while you were training. Would be unfair to have you carry me. I have 4 paws, too. I don't mind carrying you, buddy. But whatever makes you sleep at night, the trainer said, bending down to pet Pikachu's tail. When Ash deemed his starter melted enough in happiness, he pulled away. He didn't bother recalling Greninja, as he set off towards the city. From what he'd already seen and what Kukui had said, he stood out like a sore thumb. His clothing was enough for that. If not, someone just deemed him a tourist. Well, Pikachu was enough to draw whispers. So, what were another few stares they got because Greninja was out, too? So, where to? Ash asked silently. He didn't want to speak out loud, if not necessary. I'm hungry, Pikachu chirped helpfully. Can we get food? Ash gave the electric mouse a deadpan stare. We just had breakfast. Pikachu's ear twitched and Ash swore he saw his friend dig his tiny claws into the Alolan ground deeper than normal. But I want snacks. I would not mind some food, either, Greninja supplied innocently. Ash's right eyebrow twitched. And people say I'm the one who eats like a Tauros? You guys gonna eat me out of my money? You're a champion, Satoshi. And one who gets various rewards for saving the world in almost biannual intervals. Even the whole ranch would be hard-pressed to eat you out of money, and Charizard and Snorlax separately eat even more than the 2 of us put together, Pikachu chirped, gesturing at Greninja. Ash just rolled his eyes, silently deciding that Pikachu and Greninja had some sort of vendetta against him. Why, he didn't know. But they had one, if they insisted on food so much. He nodded tiredly, and that was enough for Pikachu to start looking for a place to eat. They reached a busier street, that was right on the edge of where Hau'oli City's tourist and native parts met. And Pikachu perked up. I smell something good. Lead the way, buddy. Just don't run like Yveltal's on your tail. I don't think I can keep up now. Even his inhuman energy, as some of his friends put it, had limits. And he'd reached that limit now. Pikachu darted forward, leading them where his nose led him. Soon, they reached a cozy wooden building. He couldn't read Alolan, but just by the delicious smells wafting out, it was a restaurant. Pikachu bounded up the steps, and Ash soon followed. He opened the door and stepped in, followed by his Pokémon. The place wasn't big or fancy, like some in Kalos, but there was something distinctly Alolan in it. Looks like Pikachu found a place that placed tradition over the varying, colorful tastes of tourists. He walked in, only to be greeted by a young female voice, the Anovian marred by a heavy Alola accent. Looks like it was just Gladion and his sister who spoke another language so smoothly. Alola. Welcome to our family restaurant, 𝙲𝚘𝚘𝚘 Ash perked up as the voice trailed off and he blinked like a hoot when he noticed Kukui's green-haired student staring back at him. What was her name again? His eyes darted around the place and he found the professor's entire class in a corner, papers scattered around them, a set of presumably alcohol-free drinks next to them on an empty table. They stared at him, too. The green one cleared her throat, and Ash looked back at her. Ah, I'm sorry. Pecha berry poke puffs for Pikachu and another bowl of oran berry poke puffs for Greninja please. She nodded. Can I bring you something or just, the food for your Pokémon? Ash thought for a second. Surprise me with some local sweets. Never tried Alolan food before. And bring me a sherry juice, please. Technically, he wasn't on the road so he could have had alcohol, but being tipsy also messed up his aura. His aura was messy enough without that right now. Right away. She disappeared in the back, and Ash sat at an empty table. Kukui's class was still staring at him. Ash turned to them, eyes narrowed. So, there's more of you who speak another language, he remarked, looking at Lily. She stiffened for a moment and then shrugged. Mallow's good enough to help out here, but she keeps saying I'm more fluent, so she speaks as little Anovian as she can get away with. I see. The chubby blonde nudged Lily and then pointed at him. Ash pressed his lips into a thin line, waiting. They were acting like they'd never been outside their home. Wait, scratch that. If school was a thing here, probably the one who'd been most outside Alola was Lily and her brother, whom he had yet to see again. What a shame. Lily poked her fingers together and then spoke, her tone softer than before. Sophocles wants to know why your attire's all messy. Has something bad happened? Should we, maybe call an adult? Ash blinked, a bit taken aback by the question, and then looked down at himself and promptly grimaced. He didn't want to be rude by gruffly pointing out he was an adult, too. All the training with Greninja had messed up his clothes. The scratches and scrapes had healed up already, which was good. The kids would have totally freaked out, seeing him bleeding. Although a closer inspection of his clothing would reveal tiny splotches of blood here and there. He looked back at the group with a shake of his head. We were just training. Happens, if we get too caught up in it. These'll just need a wash and that's it. Before they could speak again, Little Green was back with the food, balancing 2 plates and a drink expertly. The tiny, bouncy Pokemon by her side was balancing Pikachu's bowl of Poke Puffs. "Enjoy your meal. And please tell me if you want something else." "Thanks," he muttered, sipping into the juice, eyeing the cookies she brought with some sort of whipped cream on top. For several minutes, there was silence and then Lily spoke again. "Ash?" The older trainer looked up. The kids were eyeing Pikachu and Greninja, though the most noticeable was the short, blue-haired girl, as she trailed her aquamarine gaze on Greninja. "Lana. She noticed your Pokemon and guesses it's a water type and she's interested." Ash took another bite of his delicious snack and swallowed calmly. "That's right. It's Greninja, known as the Ninja Pokemon. The final evolved form of the Kalos water starter, Froakie. And he is a water dark type." There was a momentary lapse in the conversation as the shy girl turned towards her classmates to translate all he said. Which meant she won him a few minutes of blessed silence. "How many regions have you been to?" Ash glanced at the group. This time, it was the tan boy who had scooted closer to Lily, probably to have her translate for him. There was suspicion in his eyes, but also the curiosity of a child, who had not yet seen the world. Lugia. When would they be let out into the world, to experience it? School was nice. Having that in Kanto would have helped him a lot in the early days. Or just having set off knowing more. But also, nothing could compare to actual experience. "This is my first time in Alola and I have not been to Galar yet. But otherwise, I've seen a lot of what's there to see," he answered, tone slightly clipped, hoping they would leave him peace now. His aura was still roiling under his skin and he just wanted a moment of complete silence, to catch his breath and to rein it in. This 𝚲𝚘𝚘 island was messing with him. This time, it was Lily who gave him inquiring glances. The next question was to satisfy her own curiosity. "Have you ever won tournaments?" Ash almost snorted out loud. Asking a champion if he ever won tournaments was like asking a professor if they could differentiate water and ice-type Pokemon. But, in their defense, the kids probably had no clue who he really was. And he was fine with that. People knowing too much, probing too much never meant good. Usually the power-hungry ones and the mad scientists were the ones who probed so much. The kind he hated the most. He pushed down the frustration, just a little, trying to keep his voice even. There was no harm in a few questions. "Yeah. I have proof of those at home, in Kanto." He turned to his food and took a few bites, trying to keep his posture relaxed. Trying to wordlessly convey he was not interested in their interrogation anymore, even if that was just childish curiosity of those who had not yet seen the world, yet were hungry for knowledge. "Have you ever met a legend?" Ash stiffened. Mallow's words were clumsy and mispronounced, but he understood what she was trying to ask, anyway. And like always, the mere thought of legendary Pokemon made his gut churn with a mix of emotions. Anger, hate, sadness, fondness, loneliness. The time spent with Lugia. The birds threatening to plunge the world into chaos above 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. Seeing Rayquaza, Dialga and Palkia fighting and Darkrai trying to stop them. Kyurem chasing them as they tried to help Keldeo. Yveltal's rampage not only almost taking the forest, but almost killing him. Or had he actually died? He couldn't recall. It was all fuzzy. Zygarde's natural green changing to the sinister crimson of blood as Z2 rampaged all across Lumiose, as he and his team watched helplessly, bound and at Lyssandra's mercy as "Ash, your aura." Greninja called warningly through their telepathic bond. The trainer's brown eyes snapped onto the kids and he noticed how restless they suddenly were. Lily was almost shaking, overwhelmed by his aura and the emotions it brought. He grabbed Greninja's heel ball, recalled him, and glanced at the blonde. "I'm sorry, I gotta go." Not waiting for the kids to answer, the champion bolted from the small restaurant, his shoes loud on the polished wood. The frustration in his gut, like the flames of an incinerate. The aura beneath his skin was like 1,000-pin missiles. DMN kids and their relentless questions. He ran from the city towards the beach. Being further from people should be enough for now. He ran straight towards the ocean, dodging locals and tourists alike, uncaring of what they may be calling after him in indignation. After a good 15-minute run, he deemed himself far enough from everything to be safe. Lungs burning from exertion, the champion bent over to catch his breath, the ocean's waves licking at his shoes. "DMN it all," the trainer groaned, easily falling back into collusion. "I thought," with a groan, Ash shifted the Pokeball in his hand and released Greninja once more. "I'm sorry." The ninja Pokemon studied him for a moment. "There's nothing to apologize for. They overwhelmed you. Believe me, when I was a Froakie, I did this a lot. Ran and hid whenever I was overwhelmed. No shame in that. I suppose, would you two mind keeping watch, while I try to clear my head?" "No problem," Pikachu chirped readily, rubbing his cheeks against Ash affectionately. Ash leaned into it for a moment, drawing comfort from Pikachu's ever-static charged fur rubbing against him. The mouse Pokemon leapt from his shoulder, looking at the duo. "I'll keep watch. You'd meditate with him?" Greninja nodded. "Of course. Thank you." Ash huffed as his friend darted farther away to patrol this piece of the beach, as Greninja sat down and invitingly patted the sand next to him. "Come on. You need to clear your head. You can't go back to the other human looking like you've just swam to Kalos and back." Ash huffed and plopped next to his friend. "I'm tempted to. His brats are to blame, after all." Greninja gave him a sharp, searching look, his pink eyes knowing far more than he initially let on. Ash groaned. The amphibian was one of his newest Pokemon, but he knew him as much as Pikachu. Ash blamed that on the bond they shared. So startlingly similar, yet visibly different from the bond he had with Pikachu. Ash scoffed towards the sky. "𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 Arceus. If a chill descended the entirety of Melee following his curse. Ash resolutely ignored it. He slumbered peacefully amidst the ruins which the humans believed his altar and cradle. Cradle it was not, but it had become something akin to a nest over the millennia, if he wished for solitude from other Pokemon. Granted, the chief human and whichever trial-goer he had by his side visited here, whenever there was a trial. But these days, those were few and far in between. His slumber was rarely truly disrupted. This time it was. But not by a trial-goer and his appointed warrior. Rather, by a feeling. The feeling of rippling, churning aura so strong it was like a magnet. And, there was something familiar to it. Something deep and airy, but pulsing with energy that was neither truly water, nor air. And, there was only one creature Tapu Koko knew existed on the earth. Opening his shell, the guardian rose into the air, following the aura's distant waves, like toucan followed the sweet scent of a bounsweet. He flew with speed and vigor he hadn't used in long, crossing the piece of earth that was his at speeds that would have made human heads turn, if they even saw him. Soon enough, he was by the sea, gazing at the churning waves that were as much his sister's domain as they were his. Although, not here. If he tried taking residence here, Fini would never leave them a moment of rest, and that would in the long run also endanger the mortals they were supposed to watch over. And there, sitting on the soft, white golden sand was the human. He was human, Koko knew. But the aura that radiated from him, that was not a sort of power, that was recklessly tossed into the inexperienced hands of greedy, clumsy humans. There were two Pokemon with him. One was a Pikachu. The lightning and thunder that coiled within the tiny mouse's body would have put Zapdos to shame, and wasn't that something to think about? And the other, it was a water type, but not of Fini's batch. No, the water type carried the mark of Xerneas? Interesting. And next to the water type, sat the human, young, almost a hatchling, but the power roiling beneath his skin was like the raging sea. He called out, and 3 pairs of eyes snapped to where he was floating, studying them. The human's brown flickered with the lively blue of aura, the pressure like a whirlpool against his shell. And the mark? The human carried Lugia's mark. Ash resurfaced from the sea of calmness and aura, when the presence jolted through his senses. Powerful and electrifying. It felt like 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 just stronger. A godly one. He opened his eyes, and he found a strange orange-yellow Pokemon floating above him. It was the source of the aura. Does that mean it's an electric and fairy type, too? Unusual, but not impossible. He stood up slowly, his eyes trailed on the foreign Pokemon. Greninja and Pikachu moved equally slowly, cautious and threatening at the same time. He'd faced legendary Pokemon before. If this was yet another god, well, he wasn't afraid. Koku the god cooed, almost as if greeting them. As it floated closer, both Greninja and Pikachu moved closer to him, to intercept the unknown Pokemon. Ash stood up, his shoes liked by the ocean's waves. What do you want? The Pokemon's aura wrapped around him and he could feel telepathy taking hold. But the words that he spoke escaped him. He scowled, shaking his head. The god tilted his head to the side, orange-blue gaze boring into him, like a thunderbolt that did not cause physical damage but instead affected his very soul. Koko, Ku, the legend floated around him in a loose circle, his exotic eyes pinned on Ash. Greninja growled and Pikachu's cheeks sparkled, muscles coiled for attack, if needed. Ash blinked, tilting his head curiously. There was no hostility in the god's aura. Sure, it was powerful, almost numbingly so. But not hostile. The trainer waved off his faithful friends. Wait. Let's see what he wants first. Pikachu gave him an unimpressed, you lost the last semblance of sanity look, but Ash waved it off. Ash gripped the aura that made the air so heavy, trying to reach out. Who are you? Why did you come here? The other floated closer. They were almost nose to nose. And then the legend snatched his hat, shooting into the air. For a moment, Ash was frozen and then the stream of curses came in Kukui, as he chased after the thief. That 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 𝚘𝚑𝚘𝚘 he snarled. Pikachu and Greninja leapt after him, the three of them chasing the Alolan god through his territory, dodging the occasional local, who they came across, though it was easy to see they were being led into the jungle, where there would be no witnesses of whatever the deity had planned. Get back here or I'll gut you and stuff your empty shell with 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 cells, he snarled again. The god did not stop and he was falling behind. Stupid, floating electric chicken. The thick greenery was only making it harder. Greninja was keeping up spectacularly well. But Pikachu was also falling behind. Not good. The training. Use our training with Sanpei. Greninja reminded him. Golden brown eyes widened. That could work. Unless he was an idiot, fell face first and broke every single bone there was to break. You won't fall, Greninja assured him. We move as one. And I'll be right there to catch you, if it's needed. After a long moment of thinking, Ash gave a mental nod, keeping his eyes pinned on the god whose name he didn't know. He closed his eyes, feeling for his bond with Greninja. He climbed the nearest tree, trying to reach for the annoying floating piece of wood parading as a god. Ko, the god trilled. Ash snarled and leapt off the branch. Give it back? The Pokemon just floated to the side, dodging his aerial attack, and Ash was left falling through the air, a branch nearing him. He clambered to land with his feet, arms spread to keep his balance, a hand shooting out a moment later, to grasp the rough bark of the tree. He needed a moment to get his balance back and he glared at the legendary taunting him. What was even more annoying, that he didn't even know a name. The Pokemon floated down again, disappearing behind the bushes, and Ash snarled. That fucker had him clambering up a tree only to continue the chase on ground level? Oh fine, if he wanted to play dirty, Ash would. He jumped, the speed at which he fell breaking branches and tearing vines. He landed on his feet and immediately rolled, trying to lessen the impact. The aura he had immediately wrapped around his straining ankles to try healing any damage sustained. Past the bushes was a relatively flat patch of grass, the trees so thick around that sunlight barely peeked through. Pikapi! Pikachu called sharply, just as Greninja landed next to him, barely making a sound. Ash's eyes narrowed on the god that was still holding his cap captive. Pikapi! I'm here, bud, Ash called, holding out an arm for Pikachu to land on. The electric mouse leapt into the air and landed on his arm, using it as a perch, like a flying type would. What do you want? The god trilled again and floated so close that Pikachu had the chance to jump and take his cap back. The next moment, the god was several feet away, his claws curled in an inviting gesture. Coo! Pikachu's cheeks sparkled as he glared at the bigger Mon. Ash's eyes narrowed. A fight, huh? Fine by me. Greninja, stay back. Pikachu will take care of this. 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 the water type nodded, taking a few steps back. Blue-orange eyes flashed with power and the god gave a nod. Then, his sharp call, almost like a battle cry, filled the air. Koku! Ash's breath shuddered as the god's power spread out, bringing with it the familiar pressure and the prickling feeling of static, as the surroundings were bathed in yellow sheen. Electric terrain, huh? He growled, cracking his knuckles. Fine by me. Bud, use Iron Tail and don't hold back. Gladion's day started as normally as it could, with him pointedly avoiding his family and staying as far as humanly possible from Ether Paradise. Wake up, get breakfast, clear signs of having stayed here and move out. To train. Occasionally keep an ear out for things about Lily or something stupid Ether Paradise might be cooking up again, but yeah. Those were his days pretty much since stealing Silvally. And Rockruff. Luckily for him, since the project involving Silvally wasn't even legal, Faba only reported him stealing Rockruff. At least the man hadn't completely lost it. Yet, staying on Melee was the riskiest, since their family resort was here. Since the Pokemon school was here, and as stupid as that was from their mother, she insisted Lily attend, like Gladion had, once upon a time. But, I've never been dead terrified of Pokemon, to the level I couldn't touch them. Sending Lily there was just stupid. His sister needed help, he knew that. But, he had no idea how to give that help. Or where to start even looking. And, Ultra Beasts had to be destroyed, too. And Faba needed to be dealt with. His mother will have to see his truth? Gladion froze as an explosion went off not far away, the residual tremors of which he could clearly feel. Sharp green eyes darted around the surroundings, Umbreon just as tense as he was. Umbri, she barked, and Gladion saw a flash of yellow. The power carried by the wind made his hackles rise. Is that electricity? Come on, Umbreon, he called. Survival instinct screamed at him to avoid the source of the power. But suspicion and curiosity still carried him towards the site. Raichu. Raichu had enough power for such a bolt, but those weren't exactly common in Alola. So, what else could it be? Something else flashed into mind too, but surely, that couldn't be their island guardian? Tapu Koko, while the god of conflict, stayed silent and unseen most of the time. He dashed through the foliage, startling smaller Pokémon that fled from him and Umbreon in fright, but Gladion didn't care. The tremors and the electrical currents didn't die, and the closer he got, the more convinced he was that it was a battle. Another minute later, and his breath coming slightly erratically, Gladion finally reached his destination. And what he saw made him do a double take. That was Ash, his Greninja, staying back as far from the electricity-drenched field as possible. And Pikachu was dodging Tapu Koko. His eyes went wide. Ash barked a command in Kantonian, and then Pikachu's tail gained a metallic sheen. The super-effective Iron Tail collided with Tapu Koko's shell, creating a huge gust of wind and then sending the Island Guardian careening into a tree. What, in the ever-loving light of Solgaleo? Gladion muttered, his eyes wide with shock, disbelief, and maybe just a pinch of fear. That was a Dmed god Ash was facing. Didn't he know? Gladion knew he should stop his friend. That maybe he should interfere, before the Kantonian further aggravated the nature spirit. But on the other hand, his legs just refused to move. The air was heavy with static and power, and it wasn't just generated from the Tapu's electric terrain. This was something else too, something he couldn't name. Ash grit his teeth. That Rayquaza electrified Fiero wasn't giving up, and he was losing the last droplets of his patience. You up for more, Pikachu? He asked through their link. His friend was panting, feeling the strain of the lengthy clash. Yes, though, if we don't get rid of him soon. I'm not sure how many more of those I can. Let's wrap it up with a speedy Iron Tail and then give him your strongest Thunderbolt. Pika, the electric mouse, agreed readily. Pikachu's tail glowed with the attack, but this time, the little rodent Pokémon took the battle a level higher, by jumping onto the low branches of the surrounding trees. He delivered a blow, which had Koko shaking his head in dizziness, but before the god could retaliate, Pikachu leapt onto the trees again, the leaves providing just enough coverage to slow the Guardian down. However, this was still a god and not a completely senile one. Another Iron Tail hit, which had the chicken skidding backwards, but the third was blocked when his wing lit up white with the power of Steel Wing. Iron Tail and Steel Wing collided, straining against one another for a few beats, before the god overpowered Pikachu, throwing him so roughly to the ground that it had him screaming and skidding on the forest floor. Then, the god slammed the claw of his right wing onto the forest floor, and Ash froze in his place, as massive, powerful, waves of faintly visible aura spread out from the claw, and then not even a blink later, massive, pink arcs of fairy energy tore up the ground. Pikachu screamed in pain and was tossed into the air by the explosion. Greninja had also been slowed by the electricity permeating the air. Ash's eyes widened as the ground cracked and creaked under them. The pink lightning reached him, sending shocks of white-hot pain through his nerves. The god's echoing, trilling call, like the toll of a death bell. Gladion watched in odd horror as Ash and Pikachu expertly dealt with Tapu Koko, the Iron Tail's steel-type super effective against the part-fairly Guardian. It was truly an epic battle to witness. Until the Guardian's signature move. The moment the forest floor gave in under the pressure of nature's madness with cracks as loud as an onyx's roar, he knew Ash was in trouble. The moment the pink electricity shocked not only Pikachu, but his trainer as well. Umbreon, Dark Pulse, he ordered. His trusted partner leapt at the Tapu without hesitation, the dark pellets hitting the Guardian's shell as it snapped closed. Gladion didn't care, because that was just enough time for him to get to the older trainer. He knelt by Ash's side, checking for his pulse and breathing, as Umbreon kept growling at the Island Guardian. As the Tapu rose into the air again, Gladion glared up at the god. Dark Pulse again. The dark ringlets of energy were aimed at the electric fairy type, but this time, those were avoided. You leave him be, Gladion hissed through his teeth. He's done no harm to this island. The Tapu floated above them, blue-orange eyes boring into Gladion's soul so deep he almost shivered. But he wouldn't leave Ash. The older trainer was unconscious and Pikachu was roughed up too. Not to mention both of their bodies were still under the effect of nature's madness, if the tiny pink shocks of electricity dancing along their bodies was a clue. Then, there was a colorful shimmer of what he assumed was fairy dust, and something floated down to him to Ash. It was a white Zering with an Electrium Z nestled in the crystal slot. It landed next to Ash's limp hand. Gladion stared at it for a moment, eyes impossibly wide, before looking up at the Tapu. Is that for him? Tapu Koko nodded. This was his trial, and he passed it well. Such a thing is to be rewarded. Gladion startled at the unknown, slightly masculine voice echoing in his mind. He needed a long moment to realize it was the Tapu talking through telepathy. Isn't that why you choose a kahuna? So they do the trials for you. He is the son of the sea. One above the judgment of mere mortals, such as the 4 chiefs I and my siblings have chosen. Gladion blinked, quickly turning that in his head. Son of the sea, he had never heard that one before, yet something was whispering in the back of his mind. Lily wasn't the only one who devoured lore book after lore book. The myths and legends of other regions were as colorful and interesting as Alola's. Yo, you mean Ash? Kanto. Ash came from Kanto, where had he read? Tapu Koko trilled in agreement, snapping the blonde from his frantic search for the answer. But beware. Lover of tides, your journeys have just begun. Gladion blinked, his mind coming to a screeching halt in confusion, but before he could say anything more, the god was gone in a blur of speed. What the hell was that all about? He murmured. A soft groan gained his attention. Directing his gaze downwards, he realized Ash was still not fully conscious. Frowning, he grabbed a Pokeball. Lycanroc, I choose you. In a flash, his faithful wolf Pokemon emerged. Lycan. Please, bring Pikachu. They need help. Lycanroc gave a growl of agreement and gently picked up the electric mouse into his forepaws, as Gladion brought Ash's arms around his neck and his other hand grabbed the Kantonian's waist, eliciting another soft mmmmm. Wincing in sympathy and with Ash's dead weight on him, Gladion turned to walk from the battle site. The undergrowth churned under his shoes, scaring away most Pokemon, giving him a clear path. For a while, Gladion had no idea what to do, though he slowly dragged the older male out of the jungle. He couldn't drag Ash across half of Hawali to the Pokemon Center, or the hospital. But he needed help. At least, proper rest, even if nothing could be done about the insane amount of electricity that he got. It was a surprise he was still alive. Such was the power of legendary Pokemon, that it wasn't hard for them to kill fragile humans, especially if they were not careful or their attacks went haywire, like now. Where to? And that was when an idea struck him. Professor Kukui, he lived nearby, right? The man could probably help. And Gladion wouldn't have to tell him he knew Ash from before, so at least a portion of the questions will be avoided. At least, until Ash woke up, that is. The professor surely spoke 1 or 2 languages. Already heaving a tired sigh, yet still determined to help, the blonde set off towards the professor's beachside home. Hopefully, he'd find the man home, otherwise for the first time in his life, he might freak out as much as Lily, whenever she accidentally touched a Pokemon. At least the gods weren't unreasonably cruel, as little as Gladion believed in them. Professor Kukui was just outside his house. Professor, could you please help? He called, gaining the man's attention as he kept dragging the still unconscious Ash. Kukui looked towards him and then his eyes went wide. Merciful Tapu, what happened? Gladion snorted as the man hurried over, helping in getting Ash inside. It was the Tapu that did it, so they're far from merciful. What do you mean? Kukui asked, as he opened the door of his house with his free hand. I saw him battle Tapu Koko, he said. Kukui's eyes went wide. Ash did what? The man asked, as they placed Ash on the man's green couch. So, did this mean Kukui knew him? He furrowed his eyebrows, as Lycanroc followed, claws clacking on the wooden floor. You know him? Kukui frowned at Pikachu's condition too. Lycanroc, please, place him on the table. Yes, I know him, Kukui said, and he hurried away. Gladion didn't say a word, waiting. Once Lycanroc put Pikachu down, he petted his old friend gratefully. Mahalo, Lycanroc. Rock, the Pokemon growled, and then Gladion recalled him in a flash of red, just as the professor returned with a first aid kit. He opened it and took out some supplies. The potion for Pokemon is also inside. Could you treat Pikachu? Gladion nodded and crossed the distance in 2 long strides, green eyes looking for the familiar spray bottle. Once he found it, he snatched it from the kit and turned to Pikachu. Do you know exactly what happened? Gladion hummed. I hadn't seen everything. All I know is that he and Pikachu battled Tapu Koko. Koko used Nature's Madness as the last attack and it caught both of them. Then, the Guardian gave him a Z-ring with an Electrium Z and flew off. He pressed the button a few more times, coating Pikachu's battered fur in the healing concoction, and he could see it taking effect moments later. A Z-ring? Kukui echoed, stopping in shock. Tapu Koko? Gladion glanced at him. Left a Z-ring. It landed right next to him. I asked the Tapu about it and he nodded. That it was for him, so it's in my pocket. He wasn't going to tell the man he knew Ash. Or that Tapu Koko said Ash was above the judgment of humans and called him a weird moniker. Or that Gladion was apparently somehow also involved. It sounded so crazy, even to himself. Well, the damage doesn't seem to be too bad. We can wait and see if Ash can tell us more. Gladion, right? 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 son. Gladion frowned at the mention of his mother. Yes, he growled out. The professor looked at him curiously. Lily misses you, little as she talks. Gladion scoffed. Just don't tell her about me. I have no intention of going home, just yet. The professor gave him a long look and then sighed. I won't. Ash woke to his body being numb. Like a thunderbolt gone haywire had hit him. When do you think he'll wake up? I've no idea. I'm even surprised he's alive. Nature's madness is the signature move of the Tapu and their strongest move that isn't a Z move. I know. Ash needed a moment to realize he heard voices and another to recognize those. Professor Kukui and Gladion. But, what were they doing in the middle of the wilderness? I'm awake, you too, he groaned, shifting on, the probably mattress he was laying on. I won't die. Ash, the call was sharp and then the almost too loud noise of feet on wood. Ash blinked his eyes open and as expected, Kukui and Gladion were next to him, their eyes shoved and relieved at the same time. How are you feeling? Gladion asked and Ash needed a second to realize he was speaking Ōnovian, and that he'd probably talked in Cantonian. People here couldn't understand that. His body was still jittery, his skin prickling with static and his ears were ringing with the overly loud churning of the ocean, but he was fine. He wasn't dead, which was a good thing in his case. He'd died one too many times already, courtesy of crazy legendary Pokemon. I'm okay. Had worse. My skin's just prickling from electricity. Incredible, he should be dead, the professor muttered. Ash frowned. Well, I'm not dead, Professor. Kukui blinked. Gladion blinked. Ash frowned even more. Those blinks were kind of unnerving. What now? Gladion raised an eyebrow. Didn't you say you don't speak Alolan? Ash huffed tiredly, rolling his eyes. Of course I do not speak Alolan. I told you already. Can you understand me? The professor asked, seeming almost wary. Ash groaned. Yes. Why wouldn't I understand you? Gladion and the professor shared another look. Gladion looked at him weirdly, his next words tentative, but shocking. Ash. The professor has been speaking in Alolan all this time. Only I was speaking Ōnovian. Gladion's words echoed almost, mockingly in his head, like a broken tape. Ash. The professor has been speaking in Alolan all this time. Only I was speaking Ōnovian. How? How in the name of Jira? You sideways, you electric torchic, he huffed. It didn't take a genius to figure what the totem had done. That last attack. It hadn't gone haywire. Tapu Koko hadn't miscalculated the angle or the power. He had allowed aura and fairy energy to rage freely. Freely and strongly, so it would stab him, like thousands of pin missiles. Still. Are you sure, Gladion? The blonde frowned slightly and nodded. Professor Kukui hummed, almost thoughtful, his eyes darting between the two younger males, before settling on Ash. Just so we're certain. I speak Alolan now, so can you understand me? Ash groaned. I understand you as clearly, as if you were speaking any other language I'm familiar with. Kukui nodded slowly. So now we're certain that Tapu Koko has done something. Something, so that you'll understand Alolan. Although, I presume, you still can't speak. Ash shook his head. I don't think so. Just thinking about trying to form the words I hear from you makes my head spin. Gladion huffed in amusement, but something akin to suspicion glimmered in his green orbs. So you tell me. One of the Tapu. Such fickle gods. Just gives you a gift that makes your time in Alola easier? That doesn't make sense. Why would Tapu Koko do such a thing? Ash shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. This time, he tried not to comment on Gladion speaking his mother tongue. It was pointless, given that he could now understand the blonde. And his aura. His aura felt different too. It wasn't as wild now. It thrummed more in harmony with the residual power of the region than even after meditation. I don't know. As you said, legendary Pokemon are fickle creatures. I've met a few over my years on the road, and they still don't make sense to me. Perhaps we, mortals, were never meant to understand the whims of gods. Gladion eyed him, like he wanted to say something, but still chose to stay silent. Kukui hummed. Well, I need to get ready for work. Gladion, could you watch Ash till then? Considering the possible injuries or side effects, I'd rather not leave him alone, even for a bit. Understandable, Professor. I'll watch him. Kukui gave one last contemplative look to Ash and then slipped off to get ready for his day at school, leaving the two younger males in his living room, Ash still laying on the couch and looking a little pale, but otherwise unharmed. Pikachu was also stirring awake under Lycanroc's watchful, crimson eyes. Gladion's green gaze flickered to the small electric type, before he looked back at the trainer again. Did you know, he asked quietly, that you were picking a fight with a legendary Pokemon? A literal god of the region? Ash rubbed his face and hummed. I did. I recognize gods when they come close to me. They just have a feel to them, although I guess you'd felt Coco's power for yourself. Gladion's pretty green eyes narrowed and Ash saw the sharpness in them. They were as deadly as a well-aimed night slash. Why fight then? Most people would run. Or marvel at seeing the island guardians. They do not show themselves to just anyone. Ash tilted his head to the side, listening to the blonde, his words filled with confusion and frustration enough that he mixed 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 and 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 again. Except, this time Ash did not have a problem understanding him. Not like weeks before, still out in the wilderness of Kalos. Gods are mostly the same in every region, he shrugged. I've dealt with a couple of them before. I'm not afraid of them anymore. Besides, it was Tapu Koko who picked a fight, not the other way around. Gladion crossed his arms. Why though? He asked softly, eyes glimmering with curiosity, suspicion and confusion at the same time, this time his words unblemished 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘, despite the fact that it had been established Ash did now understand alolan, even if he couldn't speak. Why did Tapu Koko say that you were above the judgment of mere mortals? Ash went rigid, pressing his lips into a thin line, as his eyes slid closed. I'd like to think we're friends, Gladion? With his eyes closed, Ash did not see how Gladion went rigid at the question, appearing both thoughtful and somehow restless. Yes. I think so, even if it is a new friendship. Ash huffed, looking away. Then, for the sake of that budding friendship, do not ask. Do not dig further into it. It would only endanger you and I would hate that. I hate seeing my friends and rivals in peril. Their eyes met again, pale emerald on golden brown. And Gladion had to turn away. Clearly, he would not get his answers from the 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘, no matter how much he wanted to have answers. He is the son of the sea. One above the judgment of mere mortals, such as the 4 chiefs I and my siblings have chosen. When they heard Kukui rummaging through his bedroom, they perked up, the sound breaking the heavy silence. Gladion. The blonde turned to look at him, and ignoring the slight awkwardness of the situation, answered in 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘. Yes? Ash frowned slightly. About Rockruff. I brought him back, but I also remember why you'd left him with me. The ether sun scrunched the bridge of his nose in displeasure. I apologize for the trouble. Ash raised a hand, silencing the blonde. It wasn't trouble. I just want to know what was up with Rockruff. Gladion hummed. I said, I think Faba stole him from someone, but mother wouldn't listen to me. And if they found Rockruff with me? I didn't want him hurt. Faba isn't known for his gentleness with test subjects. Golden brown eyes narrowed. Test subjects, he hissed. That didn't sound good. Gladion gave a hesitant nod. Yes. And I admit, after our brief meeting, I looked you up. Ash stiffened, eyes widening before they narrowed into pinpricks. Looked me up, huh? Gladion hummed. I don't know what a master-ranked agent of the WCA was doing out in the Kalos wilderness like you were when we met, when you could get luxury lodgings for half their actual price, but that's not my business. What I care about is... Ash snorted, looking amused. Did you just call me an agent? Where are we? In some kid's detective show? We're all simply members, although you're right that the different rankings grant different privileges or access level to information, rather. Gladion's cheeks dusted pink, and he looked away. Don't tell anyone what you dug up on me. I don't know how you did it. Much of it needs a certain access level and even more is downright classified. Gladion fidgeted uncomfortably. Look, I don't care. As long as you don't go off selling WCA information to the likes of Team Rocket or Lysandra and Team Flare. Gladion winced. We heard about what had happened in Kalos, in Lumiose. I would never work with men like that guy. What you told me in the forest when we met for the first time, Ash said quietly, had me drawing that same conclusion. Yet, you chose extreme ways to see something done. I will not tell anyone. I won't report anything. In fact, while I'm here, I'll keep an ear out for this Faba guy. I did say I want vacation, but menial WCA work is pretty much vacation, compared to the shitstorm in Lumiose. Mahalo, as we'd say in alolan, he said, lips twitching upwards. Ash huffed, nodding, but before more could be said, Kukui returned. Ash, as you know, I need to go to the Pokemon school. The Cantonese nodded, shifting on the couch. His aura had prevented serious damage from the Guardian's attack, but it certainly hadn't been a pleasant experience and his head was light. Sweet oh ho, he needed a coffee and now. Yeah, okay, he muttered, standing up, Gladion's hand immediately snapping out to steady him, as he stood up. Pikachu was also awake, his eyes darting between Lycanroc and Gladion and he was still contemplating if Ash needed to be saved. Are you okay, Satoshi? Ash tossed his oldest friend a subtle smile. Nothing to worry about. A little lightheaded, but nothing a cup of coffee can't fix. Hey, careful. You did just take a several volt attack. Ash hummed. I've had worse before, don't worry about me. I need a coffee before the killer headache kicks in. Then, he turned to Kukui. What was that you were saying? I need to go and teach my classes. And you're coming, Ash. Nanny? Why in the name of Molters do I need to go? I'm not a school kid anymore. I'm a legal adult in all regions. Kukui and Gladion stared at him blankly, the blonde with a slightly raised eyebrow, and that was when Ash realized he'd slipped into 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘 in his distress. Ash huffed, closing his eyes and forcing himself to repeat that in a language the other two would understand. I'm a legal adult in all regions, Professor. You can't have me going to school. Kukui hummed. I don't want you there as a student. I just would feel better if you tagged along, where I could see you. Gladion did say you took one of Tapu Koko's strongest attacks. That could have killed you. Ash snorted inwardly. I'd think Arceus would sue him for that. Besides, Lugia would flip sheet if that electric Fiero tried something. I have to agree, Pikachu hummed. Yet, Lugia isn't around right now and I don't think it would be a nice thing to summon him with the song. And, to me it seems, at least the professor is a reasonable adult. Ash sighed. Fine. But at least let me get a cup of coffee to sip on the way to your workplace. Kukui laughed and nodded. The class was about to retreat into their usual classroom, waiting for their professor to arrive, but Lily lingered on the yard still, glancing towards the school gates. I wonder. Will he come? He somehow knows Gladion, the blonde thought, her fingers laced together tightly in front of her chest. Does he know where he is now? As if the Tapu had heard her prayers, Professor Kukui stepped through the gates, Ash walking calmly next to him, gripping a styrofoam cup and occasionally taking a sip. Good morning, Professor, Ash, she greeted pleasantly in 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘, remembering that the visiting trainer didn't know their mother tongue. Good morning, Lily. Morning, Lily, Ash returned, nodding briefly. Pale green eyes settled on the 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. I thought you were too old for Pokemon school? Ash hummed. I am. But Kukui here decided I need the daycare, so, he rolled his eyes. Lily blinked, her eyes darting between Ash and the professor. Daycare? Ash shrugged lightly. Had a little incident after? I left the restaurant. The blonde girl winced at the reminder, as if someone struck her. I'm sorry. We overwhelmed you, didn't we? We should have been more considerate. I hope you didn't get hurt, bolting away so distressed. Not your fault. Even if that hadn't happened, I think my incident would have happened. The professor snorted. You call fighting Tapu Koko to a stalemate an incident? Lily yelped in surprise. Why you fought an island guardian? Ash shrugged, like they were discussing fighting a random wild Ninetales and not an island guardian. Gods are all the same, no matter which region one goes to. But, shouldn't your class be starting? Just because Kukui insisted I tag along so he can keep an eye on me, doesn't mean you should skip your classes. Kukui chuckled, as he herded them both towards the classroom. It isn't really skipping class if I'm here, too. Now get inside, all of you. Ash took a deep breath and didn't say anything. Pikachu lowered his tail, so it brushed his back calmingly and the trainer hummed, closing his eyes to calm down. Just one day in school. He could survive. Kukui was just distressed. He could deal with a fretting professor. For one day, right? He could, indeed. As long as the man didn't ask questions. Gladion knew too much already. The next time he saw that annoying floating piece of wood chicken, Ash swore he would kick him all the way to Sinnoh without any remorse. He did not want anyone dragged into his mess of a life. Especially not Gladion, for some reason. Stepping into Kukui's classroom hadn't been the best idea. Ash just knew he should have stayed back at the professor's house. Or perhaps accompanied Gladion around the islands. The blonde was an Alola native. He could have shared a lot of information and his company had been pleasant last time. He heard as Kukui explained in Alolan to his class, that Ash would be staying today and observing their classes. The students shared looks and Lana, as puzzled as the rest but daring enough to speak up, asked why. Ash shrugged. Because someone, he pointedly looked at Kukui, talking in 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘. Even if only the professor and Lily understood, and Mallow, they could translate for the others. Didn't want to leave me alone. So I'm stuck here for today. Once Lily translated for her classmates, it dawned on them all and the blonde called him out on it, too. Why you understood what she said? Didn't you say you don't speak Alolan? Ash shrugged. Your gods are fickle, little girl, and for some reason, one of them thought to humor me. Green eyes widened. Why you mean Tapu Koko? She asked, the guardian's name drawing the attention of her classmates too. So, you really met the guardian? 𝚲𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 shrugged. I did. But, what do you mean, humor you? We battled. It got interrupted, but his fairy power, he's done something. So I can understand Alolan as clearly as I understand you, speaking Enovian. Though I can't speak your tongue-twisting words still, for dear life. Kukui chuckled, patting him on the shoulder. Actually, learning to understand is the harder part, so? Tapu Koko had helped you out. From here on out, learning to speak won't be that hard. I can help you, if you'd like. And, he glanced at Lily, if you stay around the school for a bit, Lily can help as well, I believe. And that would be a good practice for the rest of the class, at least in one language. Enovian, I presume, Ash huffed. That's the most used and, honestly? Likely easier to learn than Kalosian or Cantonese. Lily translated for her friends again, earning gasps from the rest of her classmates, except the tallest boy. Ash noticed that the red-brown-haired male was looking at him with narrowed eyes, shock glimmering in his black eyes. Ash matched the other's gaze and raised an eyebrow. The suntanned boy pressed his lips into a line and spoke in a deep timbre, his eyes pinned on Kukui. Oh, the professor hummed, glancing at Ash. Ash rolled his eyes again. I can understand you, you know. Talk to me, if you want something, he pointed out, crossing his arms, making sure the white 𝚬𝚑 he'd received from Tapu Koko was even more visible. Was he taunting Kukui's kid? Maybe. Sue him then. The boy's eyes narrowed. How? Do you have that 𝚬𝚑? 𝚬𝚑s and Z crystals can be used only by those who participated in the ceremony. Ash's eyes narrowed at the suspicious tone of the younger trainer. A kid, really, at least, according to Alola's laws. Sweet Groudon, they were in a school, even. Tapu Koko gave it to me, after a scuffle, he said, tone clipped, waiting for one of those who spoke the language to translate. But, those aren't just given, Lily said carefully. You have to fight the island kahuna to receive. Ash shrugged. Look, I told you. Gods are fickle. Don't mess with them. Getting this ring from that electric 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 will only cause me a headache, I feel. Kukui couched heavily at that comment, muttering in disbelief that he was so readily disrespecting a Pokemon with such great power. Now, please pay attention to Kukui instead of interrogating me on things that aren't really your concern, kids. I'm only humoring Kukui today, staying here. He stepped aside and slipped between Mallow and Lily's seats and past Kiawe's, sitting on the wooden floor in a sunny patch, Pikachu jumping from his shoulder to curl by his feet. Kukui raised an eyebrow. We can get you a... Ash waved the older man off. Don't worry about me. Just teach your classes, Kukui. I'll stay right here, so you can be sure I'm fine and then we can forget this mess afterwards. Kukui eyed him for a long moment, but then sighed and started the day with a history class. And as much as Ash was pretending to meditate, he was actually listening to the class. It allowed him a peek into Alola's story and culture, if only a little. The following class, Pokemon Science, was just as interesting, and during that one, he did not even try pretending to be meditating. Finding out that Pokemon he knew from Kanto, or other parts of the world, looked different and had different types, was nice. Not that he had not heard about that. Or the Galarian regional variants. But hearing this and that and seeing it with your own eyes was an entirely different thing. Perhaps. There would be something positive about staying in Alola, other than perhaps learning a new language. The sun was just rising above the Alola region, but Ash and his Pokemon were already awake. Pikachu and Garchomp were sprawled on the white sand of the beach before Kukui's home. Little Rockruff was also curled next to the mouse Pokemon. Ash and Greninja, however, were as active as ever. Trainer and Pokemon were sparring, which would not have been unusual if another Pokemon was the opponent. However, they were facing each other, trading blows without flinching. Greninja jumped, and in a rapid move, kicked at Ash's head. The trainer raised his arms above his head, crossed to defend from the strike and pushed against the attack, to get Greninja off him. The shinobi frog landed on the soft sand, barely making a sound, and their eyes met. Then, Greninja created two long, purple blades of energy, reminiscent of katana. Ash took a step closer as Greninja offered one of the night-blades and then backed off. There was a long, tense moment of silence, then at some invisible signal only the two of them noticed, they moved at the same time. Greninja didn't give him a verbal warning, like he used to during their very first sessions, after Ash had first asked the Pokemon to teach him. But the slight shift in aura helped and Ash could react in time, shifting his feet on the sand and raising his blade to match Greninja's. There was a hiss from the pressure and Ash took a breath, gathering some aura around it for reinforcement. Training like this helped him wind down, keep his instincts sharp and maintain a finer control of his aura, which would have been hard otherwise. Greninja had some unusual ways of teaching, but Ash wasn't going to complain. He'd learned quickly how effective those were. Besides, he had asked his friend back in Kalos. He pushed back with his full strength and Greninja was forced to release their locked weapons and he shifted his grip to jab him with the pupil white blade's end, but Ash dodged and instead went for the Pokemon side. Greninja caught the move and stopped him, shifting to face him fully again. They kept trading blows rapidly, dancing around the beach as from time to time, either one or the other, was forced to back away, to gain space and momentum again. Ash wasn't sure how long they'd been at the fighting, but Greninja had considerable stamina, when he didn't have to survive heavily damaging moves or extend his powers for defense. And, from all the running and traveling, Ash had some stamina, too. He'd never be able to outdo a Pokemon on that, but that wasn't the goal of these sessions. Greninja stuck again and Ash's aura sense tingled as the katana-like stream of energy neared him. He leaned back to avoid damage, while raising his left hand to try deflecting, the other helping to maintain his balance. There was a hiss as the blades met, and Ash lost his balance as he sensed someone nearing, as much as he heard them. He upped his hand with a flourish, and the purplish-white blade dissipated. Catching the signal, Greninja also cancelled the Night Slash, as Ash stood slowly, dusting himself off from the sand. From the house, Kukui emerged, his face slack, eyes wide. You know, Kukui said in 𝙀𝚘𝚘𝚘, this sort of training. Ash rolled his eyes. I'm used to it. Helps get rid of the pent-up energy I don't burn off, since I'm on, an island. It's not that, Kukui said, shaking his head. It's just, Pokemon are, in most cases, stronger than they look. Certain moves can incapacitate you if the Pokemon doesn't use its full strength. But, at full strength, the same move could kill, too. And I don't mean Tapu Koko. Ash raised an eyebrow and then snorted as Greninja approached and they exchanged a fist bump. Believe me, I know. I know that better than anyone. But over the decade on the road, I had to deal with all sorts of shady people and organizations. And several times, it would have been nice if I could have defended myself better, so my Pokemon could have focused on defending themselves or innocents caught in the crossfire. He shook his head. Took me years. If not for Kalos, I would still be in denial. But no more. And Greninja is the perfect teacher, he said, tossing an appreciative glance at the ninja Pokemon. Ja, Greninja called softly, looking away. Was he flustered? No. Greninja was too aloof, too composed, for such a praise to fluster him. Right? Besides, Ash continued, looking back at the professor, this is good training for us all. It helps me understand my Pokemon in a different way. It helps me learn self-defense or rather combat, and it teaches them to moderate their strength better. As you said, humans aren't as sturdy as Pokemon. This is as much training as it is a game. Kukui huffed, shaking his head. You are different, Ash, It's not like. I don't occasionally play tug-o-war with my starter, but I wouldn't wrestle with him, the way you traded blows with Greninja. Ash snorted. Different? Oui j'y. You just don't know how much. If he just mixed languages sometimes, well, excuse him. He spoke more languages than most people, and he was pretty comfortable using most of them. I was wondering if you would come with me today, as well? Kukui asked. Ash raised an eyebrow. What for? I'm not school age anymore, he huffed, this time keeping his sentence clearly 𝙀𝚘𝚘𝚘. Even if Kukui spoke Kalosian as well, he didn't want to give the man a headache. He'd learned fast that most people, even if they spoke more than one foreign language, got confused or tongue-twisted quickly, if they had to switch between languages so fast. Maybe that was why 𝙀𝚘𝚘𝚘 got so popular among so many people. It was fairly easy to learn, compared to Kalosian, for one. Or Cantonese. Kukui gave him a look. You could fool the kids, but not me. I know you were paying attention to my classes. Ash stiffened and then slumped a little with a dramatic sigh. Sweet oh-ho. I was found out. The professor laughed. Oh, come now. Learning Alolan may make things easier for you and spending time around the class may just be a way around that. Or at least, spending time around Lily. Ash perked up at the name and not only because she was Gladion's sister. He grabbed the Pokeballs and recalled his team, Pikachu readily leaping onto his shoulder. What's with her? I noticed she was dancing around all the Pokemon around school. Is she afraid of them? Kukui frowned as they started walking. Yes, sadly. As her mother explained to me once, an incident happened when she was younger. She doesn't really remember it, but it had been traumatic enough to leave her unable to touch Pokemon. Still, 𝙀𝚘𝚘𝚘 had her join the school, in hopes of her eventually overcoming her fear. I see, the younger one hummed thoughtfully. Regardless of that, I think Lily could show you around a little. I'm afraid I don't have all the time I would like to show you around 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘. As much as this place has natural beauty you can explore for yourself, a guided tour would be just as worth it, if I had the time. Don't worry about that, Ash shrugged. Maybe Lily wouldn't mind showing me around. Oh, I'm sure she'll agree. She likes history and Pokemon, and she knows plenty about them. Kukui smiled. Maybe one day, she might become a professor herself, if she overcame her anxiety. They walked in silence for the most part, after that. With the school just out of sight and the Alolan sun bright above them, with a slight sea breeze, it truly did feel something akin to a vacation. But being away from Kanto was always nice. Even if he missed Shigeru and Lugia. A drop of blue in the still, black-blue pond. Ash perked up, muscles tensing into readiness as the powerful presence brushed his aura sense. The continuous training with Greninja made him all the more aware of the aura signatures around. And the more powerful one was, the harder it was to miss. Or ignore. Ash? Kukui called, faltering a few steps ahead. I'm alright. Just forgot something. Please go ahead, I'll join you soon. Kukui frowned, concern flickering in his dark gaze. Ash. Ash tilted his head to the side, eyes narrowing. Look. I appreciate your concern, as unnecessary as that is. And I appreciate your hospitality as well. But I am not one of your students. I can take care of myself. Go ahead. I'll come back in a bit. Kukui gave a hesitant nod and walked ahead, as Ash slowly backtracked, looking for the aura he sensed moments ago. He closed his eyes, the slumbering power surging forth, bubbling just beneath his skin. When he opened his eyes, they had a faint blue sheen and the world around him was a burst of black, gray, and several shades of blue. A jolt of pink-blue. Ash's gaze snapped in the feeling's direction and aura, laced with electricity and fairy energy, invaded his senses. Fing floating. The god he'd fought before was somewhere around the school. He blinked, pushing the aura down and broke into a run towards the school. The god had been anything but nice that one time, and he didn't feel like seeing kids caught between the electric Torchique's clawed wings. He didn't know if Kukui actively battled or not, but it didn't really matter. Most people, and, well, regular Pokemon, were not up for dealing with gods. But we're ready to deal with him, if we must, Pikachu said, as Ash's feet hit the road rapidly. Indeed, buddy, he agreed. As much as this was a way to get away from Kalos, and even from Pallet Town, he was still part of the WCA. And while he technically had no ties to Alola, any compassionate trainer who had the means and skills to help would have. And it was also duty, too, and not only as a master-ranked WCA member. He may have run from it for ages, but he was an Aura Guardian, whether he liked it or not. And as one who had as many ties to Pokemon, as to humans, it was his duty to be a bridge between them. To be a bridge between the elusive gods and the humans, so that catastrophes could be prevented. He closed his eyes for a moment, his mind wandering a decade into the past. Lucario. Aaron, how about you help me out now? He just barely crossed into the school grounds when colorful confetti burst forth from somewhere and Kukui's kids jumped from the cover of the gate, startling him. Alola surprise, they called. Surprised as he was, Ash reared back, muscles coiled for attack, aura flickering between his fingers, nearly coalesced into a complete aura sphere, the Z crystal on his wrist flickering with the raging aura. The kids were all grinning and he slowly relaxed somewhat. What the hell, he hissed in Unovian, looking for either Lily or Kukui. The professor was nowhere in sight, so he turned to the blonde girl. Lily smiled, but it was Mallow, who spoke up, her Unovian unsure, but easy to understand. Why Lily had said the green-haired girl was insecure about her language skills, Ash couldn't fathom. She spoke Unovian better than many foreigners he'd heard over the years. Well, we decided it would be nice to have a surprise welcome party. Professor Kukui said it was okay to do, especially since you were staying for a while. And, we planned some challenges for you, if you'd accept. Ash tilted his head thoughtfully, sharing a glance with Pikachu. Challenge? Well, you don't know what you signed up for, kids. They walked further into campus, and Ash was met with the sight of two huge piles of balloons. First challenge is to pop the balloons, Lily told him. Whoever pops the balloons first, wins. And it can be either trainer or Pokemon. Ash huffed. Well, alright then. Ready, Pikachu? Pika. His challenger was Sophocles and his 𝚱𝚘𝚘𝚘. And the round boy and his partner were making quick work of the balloons. Ash's eyes darted over to the two. Those spikes are sharp enough to make the task quick. But he wasn't going to make it easy for the shrimp. He may have had a Pokemon partner perfect for this challenge, but Ash wouldn't let him win so easily. They both grabbed a ball each with Pikachu, his friend sinking his sharp little teeth into the ball. Ash tried to pop one with his hands and clicked his tongue. Tougher than it looks. Sophocles was a quarter way through. Ash rolled his eyes and applied a little more force and just the briefest drop of aura. His and Pikachu's balloons popped at the same time. They shared a look and then grabbed another, the second set popping much easier. They were halfway through when Ash noticed 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 rolling around, electricity covering the little 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘, the rubber shrinking with satisfying pops. That's it, we won. Sophocles cheered, as the last one popped on his partner's spikes. Ash huffed, slightly annoyed and amused. You didn't say we could use moves, he called, looking at the two girls. We did say it didn't matter if Pokemon or trainer popped them. Ash rolled his eyes. Cheeky brats. That caused the two girls to giggle, and then Mallow grinned at him again. Time for the second challenge. They made it to the small moat that ran around the field on the side, and Lana stepped forward with her small blue Pokemon. From the Mon's appearance and coloration, it was a water type, so unless he was allowed to switch, Pikachu would be at a disadvantage. Say, he turned to the group. Am I allowed to switch? Your friend has a water type and judging by the looks, you want to use the water for this challenge. Pikachu would be at a disadvantage. He can swim, but there's no question it would be Poplio, Lily supplied. The Pokemon is Poplio. It would be Poplio who wins. A water type in a moat, it's their environment. Lily and Mallow glanced at each other, translating for the rest of the group, and after a moment, they all nodded, Lana all too happy at the challenge. Ash hummed, scratching Pikachu behind the ear. Hope you don't mind, buddy. Not at all. Greninja is definitely faster in the water than I am, the mouse agreed. Ash's lips curled upwards as he took out the pink-yellow heel ball. All right, my friend. I choose you. Greninja appeared in a flash, immediately gaining the kids' attention again. The two water types shared a glance as 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 started the race, both leaping into the moat. Lana took off running and Ash let her have a head start. He was taller and older, so it wouldn't take much to catch up to her. And indeed, it didn't take much. And clearly, being bigger and stronger, worked in Greninja's favor as well. Yet, neither Lana nor Poplio were giving up. He appreciated tenacity, and both had spades of it. He winked at Lana as he ran past her, Greninja jumping out of the water at the finish point just a moment later. Poplio and Lana arrived a few minutes later, the girl more winded than her starter. The others arrived as well, their eyes wide. Wow, you're fast, Mallow commented. Ash shrugged. I've been on the road for ages. It built up stamina and speed. Besides, you're a few years younger. You'll get better at it, once on the road. And, while both water types are starters of their respective regions, Greninja is fully evolved. And Poplio is in the initial stage, Lily noted. So you had the advantage here. Ash gave her a look. And Sophocles had the advantage in the balloon popping game. So I call it even, kids. They murmured and chuckled, agreeing. One win and one loss wasn't a bad ratio. Besides, they'd made this welcome party to have fun. The third surprise, as the kids called it, was a Tauros race. Ash smiled, rubbing his chosen Tauros nose, the Pokemon huffing contentedly. Would you mind helping me out? Roos, the normal type, huffed, as Ash pulled himself into the saddle, 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 already seated. The race was a tight one, and surprisingly fun. But, to be honest, he wasn't fully used to the ride gear Alolans used. Garchomp may have had one, but it was slightly different from the one used for Tauros. And clearly, 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 was a natural. The Alola native won the round, but the way he rode certainly earned the praise from the kids. You're good at this, 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘 said. These Tauros are used to people, but they're still restless sometimes. It seemed like yours was fully in sync with you. Ash shrugged. I have Tauros at home, in Kanto. I know how to deal with them. And as you said, they are well trained and calm. With the class deeming the games concluded, they retreated towards the building, where Kukui and Principal Oak were waiting with a table full of food. Ash's lips twitched upwards at the sight. He was hungry, and that table smelled as delicious as it looked. Oh, it looks delicious. All from our restaurant, Mallow said with a smile. You had fun with us, so sharing a bit of food is the least thing. Besides, you could have said no to the challenges. Ash shrugged. I'm older than you and I see the world a little differently, yes. But having fun doesn't have an age limit. I came for a vacation, kind of. And this was fun. We're glad you had fun, like we did, Lily said, after translating his words for the others. They mingled around the table, which creaking under the nice snacks. Pikachu enjoyed the special poke puffs as much as he enjoyed the dishes prepared. It had been relaxing, competing against the kids. And maybe this was what he needed. An actual break from all the world-ending shit. A jolt through the water. Ash stiffened as the aura flared again, whirling around with speed and elegance. Golden brown eyes narrowed suspiciously on the sun-bathed greenery and the tranquil field. Ash, the professor called. Is everything all right? No. And barely a moment after he uttered the word, a sharp, trilling call cut through the air. Koku. In a blur of speed, the god he'd encountered before, was there, the ancient, blue-orange eyes filled with power and curiosity? Is that Tapu Koko? What is he doing? Ash's eyes narrowed, his aura blasting the legendary Pokemon and making the kids tense up. What the F do you want, DMN Electric Torchic? Didn't you get the memo from the Hall of Origins that I'm on a vacation? He snarled. Koku, the god trilled, and in a burst of speed, snatched his cap again. Not again, you 𝙲𝚘𝚘𝚘 sentient piece of driftwood. Get back here before I stuff your empty shell with Zygarde cells. Then I can use Ho-Oh's feather to revive you and start it again. He leapt onto the railing and then from there, into the air with a touch of aura, causing the onlookers to gasp, muttering in disbelief. He grabbed the legendary's broad wings, snatching his cap from his claw and anchoring his aura to the ground, shifting his weight as well. The combined effort of physics and aura was enough to make the god lose balance, tipping towards the ground. Ash's feet touched the ground moments later, but then the electric guardian freed himself from the grasp of his aura and flew upwards, to what Ash assumed the god deemed a safe distance. Koko, Ku, the god called, floating onto one side of the field that had been prepared for Pokemon battles. Is Tapu Koko challenging you to a Pokemon battle? Mallow gasped in surprise. Said Tapu Koko is a curious Pokemon. It's one of the 4 island guardians that likes to be around people the most, Lily muttered. It likes to help and play with people, but if something displeases it, it can be rather violent. Ash corrected automatically, glancing at the ether girl, as he walked towards the god. Your annoying god is a male. His eyes trailed on the god. He did not see the class gaping at him, at how casually he corrected them about a Pokemon's gender. Especially one that he had not even known a week ago. He fished out his trusty Kalos Pokédex just for the sake of it, pointing it at the god. The device scanned the Pokemon, the picture on the screen almost a carbon copy of the pose the god was currently holding. Ash hummed, eyes narrowed as he pocketed the device. So, guardian deity, huh? He met the god's gaze without flinching. The aura radiating from him left no doubt about the tremendous power the Tapu commanded. Yet, the pressure this aura was no match to the pressure brought by Kyogre or Lugia. Or by Arceus. He had met the alpha Pokemon only once. But that meeting had been seared into his mind. And after staring down countless other gods and myths that wanted him dead, this one was no problem. So far, the Tapu only seemed insistent on a proper fight. Otherwise, he could have attacked already, instead of waiting around. What do you want? He asked, clipping down Garchomp's Luxury Ball. Dragon was weak against Fairy, but Ground was immune to Electric. 50-50 odds he would take. Pikachu was another option, but the mouse Pokemon was his all-round ace and definitely his strongest Pokemon. Unless the god forced his hand, he would not give him the satisfaction of fighting Pikachu again. If Tapu Koko wanted a simple fight, then no doubt, the deity had his ancient eyes set on his buddy. Koku, the god trilled again, and as it shifted around to face him better, the power that left his body, charged the air with electricity, creating a soft, yellow sheen. Ash! Kukui called, a light note of panic in his tone. Tapu Koko's ability is Electric Surge. It creates electric terrain immediately upon entering battle. Ash chuckled, flinging the black gold Luxury Ball into the air. Garchomp, I choose you. The mock Pokemon appeared in a flash of blue-white light, roaring his challenge at the god. Gar. Ash glanced at the class. Lesson in battle tactics. Pokemon types aren't everything. You can turn around a battle that supposedly has your Pokemon at a type disadvantage. But, it doesn't hurt to consider the type matchup. His gaze turned to his Pokemon, switching to his native language without any problems. Garchomp, use Crunch. Garchomp lunged with blinding speeds, opening his jaws, teeth glowing white. Tapu Koko raised his wing to defend, but the teeth still did some damage, before the deity shook off the dragon type. The Tapu's wings lit up with the power of Steel Wing, but a glance from Ash was enough to have his partner moving out of the way. Now Sandstorm. Garchomp roared, summoning a sandstorm that had the kids crying out in surprise and fright, as they backed further away from the battlefield. Ash sensed the Guardian attacking, but with the move active, Garchomp had the upper hand. Until the god slammed the claw of his right wing onto the ground again, massive pulses of fairy energy filling the area, before nature's madness broke through the ground. Dodge! Ash barked, a mix of annoyance and panic churning in his gut. That 𝙲𝚘𝚘 trick of the gods was deadly powerful, and fairy type was super effective? The Aura Guardian winced, as his Pokemon was caught by the attack, roaring in pain, as the bright pink arcs of power kept raging around the field. Gar! As the move subsided, the mock Pokemon staggered around a little, surprisingly still having enough energy to growl menacingly at the god, before crumpling to the ground, knocked out. On the side, the class was gaping and muttering, Kukui tense in anticipation. Ash clicked his tongue, muttering his thanks, as he recalled Garchomp. He looked up, eyes trailed on the 𝙬𝚘. It was slight, but he could sense, rather than see the damage Garchomp has done. It made his lips twitch upwards. You deserved all that, for stalking me. The 𝙬𝚘 shook himself, and then floated further up in the air, pointing a claw at Pikachu. Koka. Ah, so you're not moving the wing Garchomp crunched on, Ash mused, noticing how the god was holding the other wing stiffly. You wanted a fight, you got a fight, he spat, now leave me be. Koku, the deity trilled, the electric terrain surging to full power once more, the static-filled air making his hairs rise, sparks dancing around Pikachu's small form. Trainer and Pokemon shared a glance, but Pikachu did not move. He wouldn't, unless Ash gave the command. How much longer will you keep ignoring me, Alola Gladion? Ash startled, golden-brown orb snapping to the electric fairy legendary. So, he had telepathy. He should have expected that. All gods found a way to communicate with humans, if they really wanted, and that was, most often through thought speech. Kukui and his class jumped as well, all the eyes settling on him. Ash clicked his tongue, gaze darting between the Alolan group and the god. Did they hear Tapu Koko as well? Was that because of some link, created by the electric terrain? Ash snarled, eyes narrowing into pinpricks. Leave them out of this, you 𝙲𝚑𝚘𝚘 BSTRD. If you want something from me, deal it to me, not a bunch of kids, who barely learned to differentiate Ember from Incinerate. This time, the guardian god didn't answer with words, only made an inviting gesture with his uninjured wing. Go, Pikachu. Kachu, the electric mouse agreed, leaping onto the field, muscles coiled for a fight, sparks still dancing around his form. The 𝙬𝚘 attacked first with a rapid strike, which Pikachu dodged by jumping to the side. Tapu Koko whirled around, bright, colorful light forming around its form, as it surged right at Pikachu. Dodge that dazzling gleam and use Iron Tail. Pikachu jumped up, just as the Guardian dipped down to reach him, the move digging deep into the field. Pikachu's tail glowed white as he struck the god's orange crest, just as the dazzling gleam's energy dissipated. Koko's head snapped backwards from the force of the strike, Pikachu's thunderbolt roaring to life in that same moment, catching the deity unawares. The electricity imploded, creating a massive blast, and Pikachu went flying. Buddy! Kachu, the electric mouse called reassuringly, as he landed nimbly on 4 paws. As the dust cloud settled, Tapu Koko could be seen floating a little farther away, the field below a spider web of fissures. Colorful wings resembling wood were clasped close, creating a protective cocoon. The Tapu opened his wings, trilling at the Kantonian duo, with something akin to satisfaction. Quick attack and Iron Tail again. On the side, the class watched the battle, now openly gaping. Even Kukui. Pikachu sprung into motion, his body outlined by the power of quick attack, as he zigzagged around Tapu Koko, leaping at the Guardian with a glowing tail. Why did he do that? Mallow asked, tilting her head to the side. Iron Tail's steel type is super effective against fairy-type Pokemon, Lily said. Not that. The weird combination, the green-haired girl frowned, as Pikachu's tail collided with the Tapu a second time, sending the god careening into the ground. By combining the two moves, he raised Pikachu's speed, Kukui said, his eyes never straying from the field. So the Iron Tail hit Tapu Koko even more viciously than it would have otherwise. It is a simple, but ingenious combination. He's incredibly skilled, Kukui mused, watching Ash and Pikachu. Having a Garchomp so well trained, they're difficult to handle, especially to young trainers, and Pikachu as well. It's obvious he prefers an offensive style of fighting, but he doesn't run headfirst into his fights, as it may seem, initially. He's young, but with skill and experience, clearly. Skill and experience many would kill for. Ash was interesting. He was chatty and friendly, with a drop of cynicism. And a lot of skill, a masterful trainer. Almost, like a champion, the professor mused, brows furrowed. But one so young couldn't be a champion, right? Besides, he knew most of the regional champs' names and he didn't recall Ash's. Ash watched as the Guardian rose from the crater it landed in, shaking himself clean of dust and rubble. Then, in a blink, the yellow-orange Pokemon was gone, and then, right in front of him. Fast, the trainer thought, hands instinctively crossed before his face in defense, fisted hands tingling with aura, and he wondered how fast he could form an aura sphere to slam it into the electric chicken's face. Koko's claw clinked softly against his Z-crystal, and Ash felt the surge of aura, as it glowed yellow, shimmering with all other colors of the rainbow. Coo, the Tapu called, backing to his side of the field in a blink. Ash glanced at the crystal suspiciously. I've no FING clue how to use a Z move, you know, he grouched, more annoyed than anything. The god was seriously pushing his luck today. Koko moved and crossed his claws before him. Ash crunched his nose and thought. Ash. Z moved have certain poses that are needed to activate them. Trainer and Pokemon moving in sync, Kukui called. The champion's eyes darted to the professor. Follow the instructions. I think Tapu Koko's showing you the poses for your Z move. Ash glanced at Pikachu, who nodded, and they both turned to the Tapu again. Shall we humor him, buddy? Pikachu shrugged. Can't hurt, right? The Tapu trilled happily, realizing both their eyes were on him. Feeling the nudge of aura, they moved their feet. The deity crossed his claws and they crossed their arms. Show me what 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘 you can summon, Guardian, the Tapu called. As the last of the moves were completed and the duo felt their auras linking, whirling and churning more than ever before. Alright Pikachu. Full power now. Use 𝚲𝚑𝚘𝚘. Electricity condensed before the small mouse Pokemon, and once it formed a perfect sphere shape, it launched at the target Tapu Koko. The ball surged forth, fast and powerful, so much so, that even the guardian deity's blue-orange eyes narrowed in sheer shock. The Z move exploded on contact, creating a powerful gale, and shaking the ground beneath, as a column of yellow electricity and aura shot into the sky, the discharged power great enough to start forming angry, dark rain clouds. Before the clouds could get too thick, the power of the Z move faded, leaving a huge dust cloud behind, everyone holding their breath to see the result. The wind blast had damaged some buildings' walls on campus, the crater half the size of the battlefield and at least 3 feet deep. The deity had snapped his shell closed once more, and there didn't seem to be visible damage, but the massive dust stains on the previously immaculate, bright-colored wings. Tapu Koko opened his wings slowly, shaking himself a little, as he rose into the air again. Ash cursed inwardly, feeling his aura depleted, leaving his limbs feeling like stones. He glanced at his partner. Pikachu was also winded. But at least, the god hadn't come out completely unruffled, either. That was almost as good as a knockout, wasn't it? The Tapu eyed him for a long moment and then gave an acknowledging nod before shooting off into the sky with a sharp trill, leaving behind a winded Kanto duo and a class gaping in shock. Ash shook his head and looked down at the white ring resting on his left wrist, the yellow Electrium Z glimmering in the sunlight, as if celebrating a victory. This fight definitely won't be forgotten anytime soon. Ash's team. Pikachu, ability, Static Thunderbolt, Quick Attack, Iron Tail, Electro Web, Electric Terrain. Greninja, ability, Battle Bond Water Shuriken, Double Team, Night Slash, Aerial Ace, Rain Dance. Garchomp, ability, Sand Veil Dragon Pulse, Dragon Rush, Sandstorm, Dig, Crunch.
Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.